Tingling, jingle, jingle, jingle. The harsh alarm clock rang frantically, breaking the tranquility of the early morning. In a slightly messy room, a little rough hand stretched out from the bed, skillfully grasped the alarm clock by the bedside, and cut off its bell. Click. As the alarm clock was cut off, a monkey at the bedside playing an idol was torn by something, and fell straight back, knocking the back of his head accurately on an inconspicuous button behind it. Immediately there was a soft sound of mechanical transmission, and the board of the bed where the owner of the little hand was sitting collapsed, and Kraft Lee, who was still in a hazy state, fell without any suspense. Then, what? Screams that were more harsh than the previous alarm clock sounded constantly, and Kraft, who was shocked by the shock, covered his ears and sat up suddenly from a pile of screaming chickens. Kraft rubbed his chicken coop head and staggered down the stairs. At the moment, his mind was still buzzing, coupled with the low blood sugar caused by the early morning. I was afraid for a while. Fa recovered. Faintly, relying on the habits of the past, Kraft took a drunken pace and sat down at the table, staring at the table in a daze, and yawning from time to time. It wasn't until Kraft's adoptive father, Mr. Lee, put breakfast in front of him, and then he shook his spirits and returned from the heavenly wandering. It seems that the new way of getting up you prepared for yourself works well. Mr. Lee took out 2 bottles of milk from the refrigerator, put one of them in front of Kraft, and added, "It's just a bit noisy." I was shocked downstairs. "It's bread and milk again." Kraft ignored the topic of his adoptive father, but picked up a baguette, took a bite, and complained vaguely. "We are of Chinese descent. Even if we don't have preserved eggs, lean meat porridge and pancakes, we should at least eat some buns and soy milk." "I'm sorry, Kraft, I don't know how to do those things." Mr. Lee smiled and sat opposite Kraft, and also picked up a baguette to gnaw. "So you should hurry up and find me a mother," Kraft urged with his chewed baguette. "It must be a Chinese lady who can cook." "You urge me to get married all the time, just to find yourself a cook?" Mr. Lee's face was dark, and the baguette in his hand instantly disappeared. "That. Isn't there a saying that says so?" Kraft shrank his head and argued stiffly. "Well, if you have milk, you are a mother. That's right. That's it." "Hey. This sentence is not used like that." Mr. Lee sighed helplessly, and his words were full of exhaustion. "Oh, that's what it meant." Kraft waved his hand with a grin. "Just understand the spirit. If you really want to eat steamed buns and fritters, I can help you order food at Fumanlu." Although Kraft is only his own adopted son, the friendship between the two of them is not only as simple as the adopter and being adopted, so Mr. Lee treats Kraft and his biological son no differently. "Forget it." Kraft refused decisively. "The price of Fat Lau's shop is too dark to afford it." "You can still afford it." Mr. Lee showed a gratified smile on his face. "I can be considered a rich man anyway, so I don't need to save as much as before, and can't you also make money yourself? If you are greedy, go to Fumanlu to have a good meal." "Fine, it's not enough. As for Martin, your money should be kept to help those people in feast." After eating breakfast quickly, Kraft picked up the school bags set aside and walked quickly to the door. "I'm going to school first." I completely ignored Martin Lee's roar behind him. "Hey. You haven't washed yet. How troublesome it is to wash your face and brush your teeth." Kraft, who walked out of the house, took out a piece of gum from his pocket, threw it into his mouth and chewed it, then rubbed it on his face and hair indiscriminately with his hands, and it was done. At the moment, the school bus used to pick up students also appeared on the corner of the street. "Well, the time is right." Kraft checked the time on his watch and nodded in satisfaction. "My screaming chicken battle is a big success, it's just a bit too shocking." Thinking of the terrible experience that he had just struggled to get up from a group of screaming chickens, Kraft couldn't help but shiver. "Sure enough, I still need to optimize it further." "Hey. Kraft. This way." When he boarded the school bus, an acquaintance immediately greeted him with roar. The person who called him was also a yellow-skinned Chinese. It was the young master of Fu Manlu mentioned earlier, that is, Fatty Liao in Kraft's mouth. "Good morning, David." While Kraft greeted Roar with other classmates, he walked over to David Liao and sat down. "You were actually waiting for the school bus in advance today, so was the screaming chicken battle a success?" Fatty Liao with a smile on his face asked impatiently before Kraft could sit still. "Success is success. But the trauma is a little bit big, it needs to be improved." There was an expression of indescribable expression on Kraft's face. "Oh. It's a pity, I still want to help you sell this wake-up system to Phyllis and the others soon." Fat Liao said with regret. "Come on." Kraft gave him a blank look. "I didn't tell you that I had to go to their house to modify this thing. It is very troublesome and has no value at all. After a pause, Kraft slanted his eyes at Fatty Liao, and asked, "Your son Liao is short of money again. You actually like me. There doesn't seem to be any new games recently, right? Comic magazines. It only went on sale 3 days ago. What new treasure did you fancy?" Hearing Kraft's inquiry, Fatty Liao, who was originally smiling, changed his expression in an instant, and complained to him with a look of grief. "It's not my mother. I did a good job cleaning up, and they found all my treasures. Under my arguments, my parents agreed that I would redeem all those treasures at the original price." The collection that Fatty Liao said is actually the Playboy of a well-known magazine, but Fatty Liao has a very picky vision, and the cover girl who does not suit his appetite will never collect it. But Uncle Liao and Aunt Liao were actually willing to let him redeem those magazines. It really deserves to be a black shop. Even the children of my own family will not let it go. Deserve it. Not long after the 14th birthday, Kraft, whose interest has not yet transferred to the girl, still cannot understand Fatty Liao's pursuit. A woman who can't cook is not as useful as a hex wrench. "Then you don't have any new inventions lately?" Fatty Liao hugged Kraft in tears and did not let go. "It's really impossible. You can make some more brain-dead artifacts and mechanism locks. I will take them to other middle schools to sell." "Do not want." Kraft resolutely refused. He used to make brain collapse artifacts and locks in order to raise funds. "Don't be like this. I can't live without my treasure." Fatty Liao grabbed Kraft's waist and began to mourn. "David, don't worry. When you are about to die, I can let you take a look at my treasure and renew your life. How about? Is it a friend?" An African student who has the same hobbies as Fatty Liao joked happily with the speed of their black machine gun. Roll. Fatty Liao gestured a middle finger to the damaging friend, and then sternly said, "The big butt brunettes you have in your collection can't be appreciated by labor and capital." "Hey, David. I don't allow you to insult my goddess." Then the two old critics of different skin tones had a debate about their own aesthetic standards. But soon, Fatty Liao was killed by the Black brothers' phrase, "What's the use of you saying so much, anyway, your treasures have been confiscated." Only then did he remember his original purpose, and once again he put his arms around Kraft's waist and began to cry miserably. Kraft was really impatient by Fat Liao, and said to him, "The brain collapse artifact and the mechanism lock are definitely gone, but I have a new idea recently. Waiting for the equipment I ordered in a few days, we just start work, and when the time comes, we will put the video on the internet to see how the response is. Then it's up to you, brother." Fatty Liao patted Kraft on the back fiercely, and Kraft rolled his eyes back and didn't bother to care about him. But the other classmates got excited at the moment, and they leaned over to ask, "Kraft, do you have another invention? Can you tell me what kind of invention it is? Don't be too expensive. The price of the toilet robot you invented last time is too high. I can't afford it at all. That thing was originally not sold to us. Well, it was sold to customers of Chow Show Channel. I heard that many people bought it. It's nice to have money. Yeah. The Vantis Middle School where Kraft is located is not a prestigious school. Most of the students in it are in general family conditions, and the rest are children of other ethnicities like Kraft and Fatty Liao, because the board of directors of this middle school, most of them are made up of Asians. So many Asians in New York are also willing to send their children to this school. Although America chants slogans such as human rights equality all day long, they are actually shit, and non-white people will be treated differently in this country. When he escaped from the Magia gang with Martin Lee, Kraft encountered the ugly faces of those people, so Martin Lee established the Feast Homeless Shelter to help the poor after making money. Kraft once suggested not to accept whites, but Martin refused. "It's a pity that I still don't have ability to make those magical props, otherwise I have to show the guys in the Magia gang to look good." Recalling the tragic experience back then, Kraft secretly gritted his teeth to the culprit Magian gang. Kraft Lee, male, is about 14 years old this year. 7 years ago, he didn't know where he was taken away by the Magias. The Magias carried out many human experiments on him and a large group of people who were also arrested. After a certain experiment, Kara featuring began to dream non-stop. The content in the dreams was all about a group of strangers and even other creatures making some inventions and creations. In the beginning, these dreams were not only broken and chaotic, but also endless, which caused Kraft to be in a muddle-headed state for a long time, and with such a large-scale content poured into his young head. Here, he also had a high fever at the time. Then, during his half-dream and half-waking period, the Magian gang didn't know what happened, and those who were caught back found a chance to escape from the Magian gang's experimental base. It was rare to have a sober moment at that time. He hugged a fellow with the same yellow skin tightly, and was so lucky to be brought out together. And the man he hugged was Kraft's current adoptive father, Martin Lee. I don't know if it's because of the experiment, or because of too much content in the dream. When Kraft finally got rid of the haunting state, the memory before he was captured by Magia's gang disappeared. Even he couldn't even remember his own name, because as an experimental subject, he had only a simple number when he was in the Magia gang. So Kraft took Martin's last name and gave himself the name of Kraft according to the content of the dream. In fact, the first name that came to his mind was Lovecraft. But for some reason he always felt that this name was a bit problematic, so in the end he still removed the previous Love. At first they escaped from the Magia gang with Martin Lee. The two did not even have an identity certificate. Although America has a fake driver's license to confuse most inquiries, their Asian identities will always receive some extra to make things difficult. I finally ran to the Chinatown of New York, relying on the help of other Chinese to gradually stabilize my heels. Since they stabilized their heels, the two of them lived as if someone was helping, and suddenly they got better. Martin Lee was even awarded the Medal of Freedom by the president himself, giving him and Kraft a true identity. But even so, Kraft still doesn't have a slight affinity for those whites and blacks, and he is not uncommon for the identity of the American citizen. Kraft's biggest wish is to one day save enough money to return to the other side of the ocean. So when Martin Lee spent a lot of money to buy the clothing store where he used to work and transform it into a feast-homeless shelter, Kraft also had a big fight with him. But as Kraft grew older, his extreme personality also improved, especially after meeting a few kind-hearted whites and blacks. Although Kraft still has difficulty in developing a good impression on people of other skin colors, he still will be beaten to death with a stick. After his life got better, Kraft began to try to restore the inventions and creations in the dream. Although the dream was broken at the beginning, it was impossible to sort out the content, but as Kraft got rid of the muddle state, his dreams gradually became coherent and complete, but when he dreamed and what dreams he had was completely out of his control. And because of his own knowledge and skills, Clough said he understood many things in particular, and he couldn't even copy it like a cat. Coupled with Martin's death for his pocket money, Kraft didn't have enough funds even if he wanted to try the inventions in his dream. Until one day, Kraft dreamed of an old Chinese man wearing ancient costumes. He claimed to be a disciple of the Mohist school. The content of the dream was probably that the old man made all kinds of weird gadgets with a pile of wood while teaching. A group of children has a technique called organ surgery. After waking up, Kraft took out his poor savings, bought a few basic carving tools, then picked up some discarded wood, tried to make the simplest mechanism lock, and then took this thing. Go to school and bet with people to see who can unlock and earn his first pot of gold. Although it wasn't enough for his tool money, Kraft was still very happy. Later, he specifically checked the records about the Mo family, but America did not have any relevant books at all. In the end, he went around in Chinatown and asked an old doctor at a Chinese medicine shop before he knew what the concept of the Mo family was. It's a pity that he only had 2 dreams about the Mo family, and then they were replaced with dreams that made him completely confused. The phoenix folded out of paper can breathe fire. Are you serious? No matter how scarce Kraft's knowledge is, he can understand that some dreams did not happen in his own world at all. Who is a piece of paper? And all the objects in the entire world are made of paper. This is so unscientific at all. Later, Kraft dreamed of the Mohist's mechanism technique several times, but the protagonist of the dream is no longer the old man, and even the world may not be the same. Crafting a mechanism puppet that can do repeated mechanical movements out of wood, Kraft can still understand that if I make a mechanism tiger out of wood, and then engrave it with a few light-emitting runes, it can move freely or even speak. Is it too much? However, even if he often encounters dreams that he cannot understand, he has made a lot of money by relying on other gadgets that Kraft can replicate. Later, Fatty Liao took the initiative to seek cooperation. Featuring is in charge of production, and Fatty Liao is in charge of sales. Fatty Liao is worthy of his identity as the young owner of the black shop, and Kraft's income has increased a lot at once. Later, Kraft dreamed of a long-haired man who claimed to be handmade. Inspired by him, Kraft also began to take part of the production process of his work into a video and posted it on the internet, and gave himself a Dr. S.id. With the help of Fatty Liao, a business prodigy, self-proclaimed, Kraft's Chow Show channel is now considered to be a small celebrity. Now his products are not only popular in nearby schools, but also have a lot of online orders. Recently he also specially bought a warehouse in Chinatown, intending to transform it into his own private workshop, and now he waits for the equipment to be ordered. Talking and laughing along the way, the school bus arrived at the Vantis Public Middle School where Kraft was studying. Kraft and Fatty Liao stepped off the bus and walked to the 7th grade classroom. America's public school curriculum is not onerous, and most of the teachers here do not have the habit of forcing students to learn. They pay more attention to developing students' autonomy. Students' academic problems should be considered by their parents. However, in order to better understand the content of the dream, Kraft didn't have to worry about Martin in learning. Although many times the knowledge gained from school is not useful in dreams. The technique of igniting flames to melt metal, and then summoning lightning out of thin air to forge it into a flying sword, even if Kraft mastered all the knowledge in the Library of Congress, it would not be possible to do it. It seems that my life is going to be the fate of technology. Kraft didn't know why such a thought came to his mind, but he thought it was really appropriate. Those inventions and creations involving magical celestial arts, magic and other mysterious side methods can only be viewed as animated CG. If you have an eye addiction, you have to really come up with something good. Rely on dreams related to pure technology. For example, Dr. aka, whose real name is called Doctor, whether it is an anesthesia watch or foot strengthening shoes, is a great invention. Thinking of this, Kraft touched the watch on his wrist. He hasn't been able to make foot strength shoes yet, but the craftsmanship of the anesthesia watch is not difficult. The core technology is that it can be quickly anesthetized and is non-toxic and harmless. The anesthetics of the world, but only need to be deployed according to a specific ratio, and there is no difficulty in making it. The only thing that makes Kraft more puzzled is that many of the people in the dreams related to pure technology are Japanese. In reality, there are not many Americans at the forefront of technology. Is Japanese technology in other worlds so advanced? To be honest, Kraft was very curious about this. After so many years of dreams, Kraft can be regarded as a summary of some laws. The protagonist is a dreamland of a celestial person. They are usually things that cannot be imitated without special abilities, such as alchemy refining tools, or they are forging some magic weapons that are of little use to him, although the sword that blows hair, cuts iron like mud is indeed very good, but in this era, no matter how strong a cold weapon is, it can't do a gun, and the selection of materials is so demanding that Kraft can't afford it. Then there are the big men of Japanese ethnicity on the technological side, but most of them are making all kinds of robots. With Kraft's wallet, they can't afford these heavy industrial manufacturing, like Dr. Aha, who always invented some grounding gas. The scientist of the product still dreamed too little. In reality, the American people who stand at the forefront of technology are not without dreams, but most of them are doing human experiments, and they are all biochemical roots. Kraft will never touch this kind of cheating stuff, and not to mention that he himself was originally a victim of human experimentation. Just thinking of the overwhelming tide of zombies in his dreams made Kraft's heart lingering. The rest are some rather messy dreams, which only exist in fantasy literature, such as elves, dwarf, and goblins. The things they make basically involve magical elements, and they can only make Kraft greedy but can't learn. The horrible things of, and some alien technology, basically belong to the part that Kraft can't understand at all, and many of them are not used at all. For example, an alien with a butt on the back of his head, they give self-made equipment is not suitable for humans at all. However, thanks to these weird dreams, Kraft is not only proficient in multiple languages, but also a language that is impossible to use, such as the Elvish language. He usually uses it to fool his classmates. It is very interesting to install Linguist online. Hi, hello everyone, this is the channel of Dr. Clever. In Kraft's personal studio, he was speaking his opening remarks to the camera. As early as the day when the production tools he ordered arrived, Fatty Liao, who was eager to spend money, urged him to start making the new things he said. The things were actually already done, and the related production process Fatty Liao also edited. Almost there, Kraft is now just making up the opening remarks and product introductions. Everyone knows that I have a good friend David, he is more plump. As Kraft said, he gestured around his stomach. He has always wanted to lose weight, but he couldn't find an effective way. I believe that many people have the same troubles as him. As a good friend, I decided to help him find a way, so I have this set, Slimming Kit. This time the product is still learning from the dream of handcraft. Although Kraft has been able to make some more technical and practical things, such as the invention of Dr. Ali's anesthesia watch, these things he intends to use it for self-defense, and does not intend to sell it to the outside world, and if he really sells these dangerous items in such a grand manner, he is afraid that he will be found by the police uncle. On the contrary, the interesting invention of handcraft is more suitable for making videos. It is not only safe, but also full of gimmicks. In the videos released by Kraft, the video views of products produced by handcraft are always among the best. Just a while ago, Kraft dreamed of the treadmill, and the lock of the refrigerator for dieting, fitness and weight loss, so Kraft packaged them together to make a video. After letting Fatty Liao appear on the scene to experience the effects of the two new inventions, even if all the material for the video is filmed, Kraft has always lost the follow-up work to Fatty Liao. He is basically taking care of the account of the Chow Show channel. Anyway, he is only responsible for making products. Although Fatty Liao is a profiteer, he is still very reliable as a partner. After the things were done, Kraft stopped paying attention to it, and tried to make full-strength shoes in his workshop. Anyway, his current video income is actually more from the website, and the product sales are now on the contrary. It is a small head, and even if someone buys large items such as a treadmill and a diet fitness refrigerator lock, they are usually made to order. It will be his turn to wait for Fatty Liao to discuss with the customer. Dang. Boom. An empty can was kicked into the air by Kraft, Roar screamed and slammed into a wooden board in the distance. The specially reinforced wooden board was directly smashed out of a hole under the impact of the can, and the can was just stuck in the hole. In success. Kraft fisted and loved Roar. After several failures, he finally made the foot-strengthening shoes. Well, there is a problem with the quasi-head. Kraft looked at the can that almost flew out of the board, scratching his hair in annoyance. So why do you want to develop foot-strengthening shoes? The accuracy of kicking is obviously not as good as throwing by hand. Isn't it good to make gloves? However, after this production, Kraft has mastered the core technology of the foot-strengthening shoes, and it should be no problem to develop the arm-strength gloves. That is, the funds are not enough. Kraft calculated his remaining money and sighed helplessly. This workshop has already spent most of his savings. When making foot-strengthening shoes, he also spent a lot of money on shoes. Even if Kraft tried to choose cheaper shoes, it also cost a lot of money. After all, the quality of the shoes is too high. It doesn't work if it's bad. It doesn't make sense to kick it and scrap it. Kraft. Something big. While Kraft was distressed whether he rushed to make another batch of locks for some money, Fatty Liao rushed in with a laptop under his arm and rushed through the studio door. What's wrong? Your treasure has been discovered again. Where do I get the money to replenish the collection now? Fatty Liao was furious and retorted. No. Now is not the time to talk about this. Something really happened. Now our channel is truly famous. Let Fatty Liao put aside the topic about his own collection. It looks like something really happened, but looking at his fat face with open eyebrows and smile, it should be a good thing, right? Kraft pulled Fatty Liao's arm and walked outside. He didn't like having other people staying where he worked. So, David, my old buddy, what happened? As he walked out, Kraft asked. You come and see this. Fatty Liao opened the notebook in his hand, clicked on the video they had taken before, and quickly pulled down the comment area. I saw the top comment at the top of the comment area that read, interesting idea, I plan to give one of my bodyguards. Commenter id. Tony Stark. There is also an exaggerated certification mark on the front of the id, which is the only one on the entire network, which proves that this Tony Stark is genuine. There is also a rumor about this logo. Before Tony Stark quarreled with people on this video website, some people questioned his identity. Then this guy bought the entire video website and added this to his id. Unique anti-counterfeiting mark. Kraft didn't know the authenticity of this incident, but the sign at the very least showed that it was Stark himself. So, Stark contacted you? Kraft asked lightly, not taking Tony Stark too seriously. Although Kraft is still basically only able to copy the inventions in his dreams, he is also very interested in scientific research under his influence. According to Reason, Kraft should admire Tony Stark, a genius scientist. Yes, but because of his childhood experience, he has never been able to give a good impression to guys with different skin colors. Unless he gets along for a long time and is recognized by Kraft, he will look at him differently. The Kraft, Stark, has never come into contact with him. The white scientists who have been passed are naturally not within the scope of his worship. Why are you not excited at all? This is Tony Stark. Fatty Liao was pulling his throat with excitement, unable to understand Kraft's plain attitude. Don't be stupid, David. Because there is no fan filter, Kraft can see clearly. Do you think it's difficult to replicate my little gadget with Stark Industries technology? This thing is just a gadget that Stark bought at hand, just like the rattle you bought on the street. Just order something to connect with Stark. Being splashed by Kraft's cold water, Fatty Liao gradually calmed down. He smacked his lips and said with some regret, well, you make sense, but... Fatty Liao sternly defended. I don't like playing rattles at all. I bought the rattles for the brother of the leader at the beginning. Kraft didn't want to talk to him. Don't you like playing rattles? Who was the second fool who ran 3 streets with a rattle? What happened after that was just like what Kraft said. The one who was in contact with Fatty Liao was a worker from Stark Industries. He was not as thirsty as Fatty Liao imagined, and there was no arrogance. He just bought it from here. For this thing, Fatty Liao carefully quoted a price that was not too dark, and the other party did not bargain. He gave him an address that most New Yorkers knew, the company building of Stark Industries, even if the transaction was completed. This made Fatty Liao couldn't help but sigh. If he had known that his price would have been higher. At first Kraft thought the matter was over, but he still underestimated the traffic that Tony Stark can bring. Near the school and residence, suddenly a bunch of unfamiliar or even unknown people often come to call Roar. There are also some guys who sound like scammers and don't know where they got their phone number. And the mailbox, I sent a message saying that I would partner with myself to create the brand Union. Later, there were even reporters who came to Vantis, an unknown public high school, to interview Kraft. The content of the interview actually appeared on the headlines of several newspapers, and even TV stations specifically recorded this. A program. This carnival-style development made Kraft and Fatty Liao, who had never had a similar experience, dumbfounded. It is Martin Lee who is calm about this. Capital is just like this. It will add fuel to a heat to make it more popular, and then they will get benefits and traffic. They don't care about the hot spots after the harvest. Martin Lee rubbed Kraft's little head and explained with a smile. Just like the Medal of Freedom I got back then. Do you think President America really cares about our rootless duckweed? He just wants to set an example to improve his political performance. This person can be me or someone else, just I seized the opportunity and gained a lot of benefits for myself. Kraft scratched his head in confusion. He didn't quite understand why Martin had to say this to himself. He didn't care about it at all. Or, because of the media hype, the order for his weight loss kits soared. He was too happy to have time. So while this craze hasn't passed, you put 2 sets of that smashing boat suit into Feast, which also brings me a wave of traffic, and I will pay you the money at the price. Martin said with a sly smile on his face. Is this your lord's world? Kraft sighed helplessly. Although he despised Martin's way of getting hotter, he still agreed. What else can I do? After all, Martin is also his own father, he can only do so. He will pay anyway. Mr. Stark, there is your courier in the Stark building. Looking at Playboy in his villa, Tony Stark, who was choosing his bed partner tonight, was interrupted by artificial intelligence Jarvis. My courier. Why don't they bring it home? Stark, who was interrupted by Princess Election, was very unhappy and provoked. This thing is for Happy, just send it directly to the company. These are your original words. Jarvis responded with due diligence. A gift for Harpy? Stark recalled it for a while, but didn't find any relevant memories. When did I buy him a gift? I never give a gift to a man. Jarvis did not speak, but directly projected Kraft's video in front of Tony Stark and Stark's own message below the video. Oh. I remember. Stark laughed, threw the dude aside, and shouted to Jarvis. Get me the car ready, I'll go to the company now. Contact Happy by the way, tell him that the holiday is over, let him hurry to Stark building. Driving a sports car all the way to the Stark building illegally, at the moment Happy was already waiting at the door. Tony, what happened? You will come to the company. Throwing the car key that Stark had handed over to the doorman, asking him to deal with parking and violations, Happy approached Stark and asked curiously. Oh, it's not a big deal. Stark smiled and led Happy into his barely used office. At the moment there were already 2 huge amounts of boxes. Happy, come and see the present I bought for you. Stark happily said to his bodyguard, patting one of the boxes. Oh, no, Tony, I don't think I need this. Because of the media's carnival, Happy at the moment already knew what the so-called gift was, and he was very resistant to it. The kid who came up with this invention must be the devil sent to the world by Satan. And Tony, he must have been confused by the devil too. Are you sure? Tony Stark stared at the round belly of his bodyguard, and relentlessly said, as far as your body is, if you don't explain in advance, others will think you are my cook rather than a bodyguard. If one day I am really in danger, do you really still have the strength to protect me? After all, you seem to have to take a breath after 2 steps. Definitely no problem. His professional level was questioned by employers, and Happy seemed very excited. My figure does not affect my skill. I doubt it, Happy. Stark spread his hands and shook his head. Think about your body shape when you first joined the company, and look at it now. When you lower your head, you can't even see your toes. Maybe I really need these things, maybe. Hearing this, Harpy lowered his head. Although he could still see his toes, the situation was indeed dangerous. After thinking about it, he felt that he had indeed been too slack over the years. Well, Tony, I accept this gift. Happy collapsed his shoulders in despair, as if he had seen his future miserable life. Farewell, my favorite hot dog. There are also burgers and cola-fried chicken popcorn burrito. Marvelous. Stark patted the palm of his hand, and took the melancholy Happy to the treadmill. Quick. You try this first, let me see how it works. You have been possessed by the devil, Tony. Kraft naturally didn't know that the bodyguard of a certain rich man was in deep water because of his invention. He and Fatty Liao are now taking advantage of the weekend to deliver Martin Li's order to the feast tramp. In the shelter. Kraft, it's been a long time since we saw you, you've become famous recently. As soon as he walked into the shelter, an older middle-aged woman came up and touched his little head and praised. Hello Aunt May. Hello, Aunt May. Kraft and Fatty Liao obediently beckoned to Aunt May Roar. May Riley Parker, who has been a volunteer in the feast shelter all the year round, is one of the few white people who can be looked at by Kraft. A kind-hearted person like her is worthy of respect regardless of her skin color. After exchanging a few words with Aunt May, Fatty Liao instructed the freight workers to place the weight loss suits in a prominent position in the shelter. With this group of homeless people in the shelter in a hungry state, it was impossible to use it. Kraft's weight loss kit. But Martin Li said that this can attract people who are interested in weight loss kits to visit and try. The shelter can collect fees and use the opportunity to advertise the nature of the shelter in order to obtain donations. Kraft doesn't know whether Martin's words can be realized. Anyway, he is not interested in helping homeless people. When he was wandering with Martin before, he didn't see anyone to help him. However, according to Martin, it seems that he did not build this asylum purely with good intentions. Kraft scratched his head. The adult world is really complicated. At this moment, from a room in the corner, a dumb guy with glasses came out. Aunt May, is there anything else I can help? Immediately he saw the worker who was messing with the weight loss suit and Kraft who was talking to Aunt May, and the expressions on his face suddenly became excited. Kraft. Peter Parker ran to Kraft in 2 steps in 3 steps, grabbed his arm and shook it. I heard that your invention was favored by Mr. Stark, it's really enviable. What's so envious, isn't it just selling something to him? Throwing away Peter's hand in disgust, Kraft curled his lips and looked at this guy 4 or 5 years older than himself with contempt. Although Peter Parker is Aunt May's nephew and often comes to the shelter to help, Kraft doesn't like him very much, but it's not annoying. The main reason is that he doesn't like Peter Parker's usual solitary way. But, isn't it possible for you to have a conversation with Mr. Stark like this? Peter's thoughts are exactly the same as the previous Fatty Liao, but Kraft no longer wants to explain it again, and instead of patiently explaining, Kraft is more often to diss Peter. Even if it's my thing, it's my business. What are you so excited about? And, even if you can talk to Stark, do you look open? You squat even talking to Mary. This is different. Peter Parker flushed, murmured to explain, but didn't know what to say. Kraft diss Peter can be said to be a repertoire of the asylum, and everyone around them burst into laughter when they heard it, and even Aunt May happily watched the play again. In fact, she is not very satisfied with Peter's cowardly character, so she is happy to see Kraft stimulating Peter. Maybe her nephew will change because of this. It's a pity that Peter Parker disappointed her, and after hesitating a few words to defend, Peter found an excuse to slip away. Aunt May sighed with disappointment. She didn't mean to blame Peter. It is normal for Peter to appear inferior after losing his parents and poor family. Just looking at the little fellow Kraft, Aunt May suddenly felt a little bit understand what this kid meant by other people's children. Seeing Peter confess to slip away again, Kraft opened his hands to Aunt May and shook his head helplessly. He could only help Aunt May to get here. No matter how much he hates people of other skin colors, the 14-year-old Kraft will not ridicule others casually for no reason, not to mention the relationship with Aunt May. He is aware of Aunt May's distress, so from time to time, I will help Aunt May stimulate the idiot Peter Parker. Definitely, bullying a senior student who is several years older than him will also make Kraft a sense of accomplishment. The same is true for other people in the shelter. They are all helping to stimulate Peter together. Kraft is not as popular as Peter in the shelter. Most of the staff here are volunteers who come to help spontaneously. He is the adopted son of Martin Li and is particularly biased towards him. Thank you, baby. Aunt May stepped forward and gave Kraft a hug. She really liked this kind of extreme, but very sensible child, that is, Martin Li would adopt it first. Otherwise she would want to take Kraft back. Go home. You still don't want to be the bad guy anymore. Peter's character has been set. It is impossible for him to change this level of stimulation. Touching Kraft's little head, Aunt May said with some relief, trying a few times to no avail. She also felt distressed for her nephew, and decided to let him go with the flow. Anyway, it was just a cowardly character, no big deal. Don't, Kraft said cheerfully, it's rare that there is a fair and honest reason to bully Peter. I'm so happy it's too late. You kid. Do whatever you want. Aunt May gave Kraft a sullen look, and then added, don't be bullied too hard, your brother Peter's mental capacity is not very good. No, Dow, Kraft dragged his voice, and reluctantly agreed. After chatting with Aunt May for a while, Kraft and Fatty Liao left. The work in the shelter is still busy. He doesn't want to help, and there are new experiments waiting for him, so it's better to leave early. Martin Lee's prediction is very accurate. Due to Kraft's production capacity, the Feast Hobo Shelter has caught up with the tail of the craze. The slimming kit has indeed brought a lot of traffic here, and it has also gained a lot of value. Filipino donations and monetary assistance are second, mainly the job opportunities given by some bosses, which is relatively rare. However, this craze originally didn't have a foundation, so it came and went fast, and Kraft's ears became quieter. It's a pity that he's been quiet for 2 days, but Tony Stark is messing up with him again. Originally, after handing over the weight loss package to Happy, Tony Stark basically forgot all about Kraft. This was originally a little in his unpretentious and boring rich life. The prescription is not much different from the magazine cover girls that he forgot after sleeping. But after a few weeks, Stark suddenly noticed that his bodyguard, Happy, had undergone a surprising change. Stark staring at Harpy, who hadn't seen him for a few days, Stark asked in surprise, you actually succeeded in losing weight. As Stark spoke, he patted Happy's already small belly. His surprise is completely justified. As Stark's bodyguard, Harpy's job is too leisurely. Apart from driving him and blocking reporters, he basically has no other tasks, and Stark's inspiration broke out. When he gets into the laboratory, he gets a vacation of variable length. Back then, Harpy was also a sturdy man with 8-pack abs, and it wasn't that this damned decadent life changed his appearance. Harpy also had plans to exercise, but laziness was one of the original sins. In the absence of work pressure, Harpy didn't last long and gave up. It wasn't until Stark gave him the weight loss kit that Happy mistakenly thought that Stark was starting to be dissatisfied with his work attitude, and then he made up his mind to practice himself hard. However, which fitness instructor is so powerful, can actually make you lose that layer of fat? You lose weight all at once, but I am a little unaccustomed to it. Listen. Listen. Is this human? Harpy's lips trembled, and he pointed to Stark so angry that his eyes were full of accusations. Mr. Tony Stark was confused, and had no idea what his bodyguard was excited about. Not because of your damn gift. After holding back for a long time, Happy finally roared out. After opening the chatterbox, he kept complaining to Stark about how hard he had worked in the past few days, and how miserable he was. But you have forgotten all about it. Harpy's gaze at Stark became more and more angry. Oh, okay, I apologize, Happy. I didn't expect the effect of that little ghost's weird invention to be so obvious, and you misunderstood what I meant. Tony Stark raised his palms and calmed his bodyguard and friend softly, but his tone was a little weird, apparently holding back a smile. You're still laughing. Sorry, Happy. No longer wanting to stimulate Harpy, Stark quickly covered his mouth, but the smile in his eyes couldn't stop. After patience for a while, Tony Stark, who was accustomed to letting himself go, still failed. Hold back and laugh out loud. Ha 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 ha. Sorry, Happy, this is really funny. Ha 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 ha. After laughing wildly, Stark finally calmed Harpy with his usual and easy-to-use banknote ability, but it was precisely because of this that Stark became interested in Kraft's invention again. Jarvis, call me the channel of the little guy who invented the weight loss treadmill. After dismissing Harpy, Stark took advantage of his own memory of the incident and ordered Jarvis to call up Kraft's handy channel and began to browse his past videos. Most of the videos uploaded by Kraft are self-made, and the technical content contained in them is not too high, mainly because the weird brains are very interesting, so Stark basically has fun. Until he discovered Kraft's videos about mohist locks. This puzzle is quite interesting. With Tony Stark's wisdom, he could see the clever design core of the mechanism lock that Kraft showed in the video at a glance. He quickly turned off the video because he did not want to be spoiled by the video. This kind of thing is still necessary. It's interesting to disassemble it by yourself. Jarvis, all types of Mechanical locks in the Chow Show channel, is this the name? Buy them all for me. Forget it, just give me a copy of all the products. Stark waved his hand proudly, activated his banknote ability, and started scanning the Kraft channel. Then the major media in New York suddenly discovered that Tony Stark, the darling of the news, did not know when he liked to take out a few strangely shaped wooden blocks from his pocket in his spare time and fiddle with it. Sometimes even the beauty went up to talk to him, but he just ignored it. Playboy Tony Stark has changed sex. This major discovery made the media in New York and even the United States crazy. All major headlines and TV shows began to talk about the recent changes in Tony Stark and various in-depth analysis of the reasons for his changes. It is absolutely reasonable. Naturally, someone traced down who made the little wooden block that made Stark ignore the beauty. It's Dr. Kraft Lee again. This discovery made the media's carnival even more noisy, especially when Tony Stark said in an interview, "These little wooden blocks are very interesting, much more fun than the Rubik's Cube. The kid Kraft has a great idea if he can go to university smoothly. After graduation, the door of Stark Industry is open for him at any time." The New York media rushed to Chinatown frantically and began to dig out everything related to Kraft. Fortunately, Martin Lee's At the Moment's power is no longer small and can be covered. What these media have unearthed are some bright things, such as some of their dark history after being escaped from the Magia gang. As well as things like being taken abducted to do human experiments, they were all covered up by Martin, and the reported information was even rarer, reducing Kraft a lot of unnecessary trouble. But Kraft is still being harassed so much. Now he can't even go to school. He can only stay at home and in the workplace to do research. No matter how much he likes to do these things, he is forced to do so. It's annoying to do it all the time, not to mention the bunch of lock orders that Stark brought up. Kraft wished to squeeze all these locks into Tony Stark's throat. Just when he was in distress, it was Martin Lee who stood up again. "Don't be so sad, Kraft." Martin Lee sat down beside Kraft with a smile, put his hand around his shoulder, and patted him lightly. "Didn't you keep saying that your experiment lacks funds? Now this is a good opportunity." Seeing that Kraft still had an unclear expression, Martin explained to him patiently. "Your mechanism lock is different from the previous weight loss kits. It has a deeper mass base, and Stark, a media darling, also actively advertised them. As long as you expand the sales of the mechanism locks, not to mention replacing the Rubik's Cube, at least you don't need to worry about the funds, and you don't need to spend your experience to make locks in the future. You only need to produce new drawings from time to time and leave the rest to the factory." Kraft's eyes suddenly lit up when he heard the words, but he quickly slumped. "Where can I get so much money to open a factory to expand production? Are you stupid by making things?" Martin smiled and patted Kraft's head. "I will come out the funds, and the staff can be recruited from the shelter. You only need to be responsible for the design and wait for the money to be divided. Ends." "Oh, Martin. I love you so much." Kraft jumped up happily, put his arms around Martin's neck and shouted. Martin Lee and Kraft said before that when his career had improved and he had already made a lot of money, Kraft had no idea. What he thinks is that he made a lot of money, probably because Martin allowed them to move to a relatively high-end residential area in Chinatown, and there is extra money to help the homeless. After all, Martin's own cars are just ordinary Fords, not even sports cars. Where can he get the money? But when Kraft saw a call from Martin, a series of work on the company, factory, trademark, and sales channels of the agency lock were quickly completed in just a few days, and he was surprised by what his adoptive father said. "A lot of money. I am afraid it is really a lot of money. Selling those bottles and cans actually makes so much money?" In fact, Kraft doesn't know exactly what business Martin is doing now. He never pays attention to it. What he knows is that Martin has sold some bottles and cans and some strangely shaped statues before. It is said that it comes from antiques. Although he was surprised at Martin's ability to earn money, Kraft immediately became happy after his surprise. At least he doesn't have to worry about Martin being dragged into bankruptcy by the shelter, and he will have enough funds to go to the locked factory when the facility is opened. Try the more high-end inventions in the dreamland. As for the dexterous channel that caused him a lot of trouble, Kraft was ready to give up. No. After hearing the news, Fatty Liao rushed forward and hugged Kraft's thighs and began to mourn. "We have said that we have a win-win cooperation. You can't just leave me alone, and isn't this too much for the fans who support you?" In the face of Fatty Liao's dead skinny face, Kraft was also very helpless, but after all, he was a small partner in the initial startup with himself. It is obviously not appropriate to leave him in this way, and what he said in the end also makes sense. The guy with the heart easily gave up the fans who subscribed to his channel. Okay. I will still shoot some interesting invention videos to you in the future, and I don't care how you operate it. Kraft kicked impatiently. Get up and drive, you're dead again. I know Kraft, you are a loyal man. You are simply Zuo Boteo reborn, Guan area reborn. Fatty Liao stood up at a speed that did not fit his body shape. The fat face that had been crying changed into a bright smile in a second. He happily slapped Kraft on the back, flattering without any bottom line. Stand up. F*K off. The popularity of Kraft has gradually decreased over time, but the impact has not completely disappeared. Just like all New York high schools joined exchange ball? Kraft frowned and asked suspiciously, what kind of shit is this? The black boy who brought the news, Michael, who was discussing aesthetics with Fatty Liao on the school bus before, drew his head with dirty braids, and explained to the classmates around him at a very fast speed. The so-called all New York high school joint exchange ball has been held for many times, but although it is nominally all New York, there are dozens of high schools in New York. Apart from a few prestigious schools, the rest all of them are private high schools, such as the Vantis Public High School, which is not well known, and the personnel composition is mostly other ethnic high schools, and they are not eligible to participate in it. If it weren't for Kraft's recent real fire, the school he attended was also famous once, and this year's dance party did not have their share at all. But even so, Vantis Public Middle School's participation quota is extremely limited. At the moment, the school's executives are asking about the details of previous dances and using them to decide who will participate this time. But in any case, Kraft is definitely indispensable as the main factor in getting an invitation. Can I not go? Kraft curled his lips. He was not the usual party creature in America, and he had no interest in prom or anything. Isn't the vice fragrant? Why waste time on boring things like dancing? Impossible, Kraft. Others can find excuses, but you definitely have to. Know that you are the main reason why our school can receive invitations. The school says nothing will let you be absent. Michael shook his head and replied. In fact, Kraft understood the truth, he just complained casually. Although Kraft was reluctant, when the headmaster of Vantis Middle School came to him and spoke earnestly, he also had to pinch his nose to take on the task as the school leader with the other two. The students went to the all New York Middle School Joint Exchange Ball. That's right. Although Vantis Middle School received the invitation letter, there were only 3 places, and one of them was locked in Kraft and could not be replaced. Time soon arrived on the day of the prom. Kraft put on a small suit that made him very awkward, and combed his messy hair all the year round with wax to look like an adult. Martin Lee stood in front of Kraft, adjusted his collar for him, then put his hands on his shoulders, and looked at Kraft's look with satisfaction. Yes, a handsome guy. Then he sent Kraft out the door and handed it to the other 2 students waiting outside. Kraft will trouble you. He is relatively young, so take care of him. Don't worry, Mr. Lee. Francisco is the oldest of the 3. He is a Latino in the 12th grade. He is also the chairman of the student council of Vantis Middle School. He is good at social entertainment. Kraft is only the nominal leader. In fact, the school delegated the main communication tasks to Francesco, and the principal had also confessed to Kraft about these matters, so he actually only needs to show up in the past and eat and drink. There is also a place for an Asian senior in the 10th grade. She is not a figure in the school. She is very ordinary in all aspects. The reason for being selected is simply because his father is a school manager, and the position is relatively heavy. School manager. Hello. This is Amy, please advise. The senior sister bowed 90 degrees and introduced herself. Senior sister is Japanese? Seeing Amy senpai's movements, Kraft subconsciously communicated with her in Japanese. Hi. My mother is Japanese, and Lee Jun speaks Japanese really well. Amy senpai covered her small mouth, and replied in a weird Japanese accent in surprise. Let's talk in English. Kraft sweated a bit. The girl's plastic Japanese was not as good as her own pronunciation, which sounded awkward. Kraft is really amazing. Not only has he invented so many interesting things, but even the Japanese is so good. The long-sleeved dancer Francisco seized the opportunity and praised him. Haha, it's okay. Because of his dream in mastering multiple languages, Kraft, who has not made any effort, raised his hand in shame, and habitually wanted to scratch his head. After touching the stubborn hair, he remembered that he did it today. Hairstyle, and dropped his arms in a jealous manner. The 3 of them got into the car specially prepared for them by the school, and drove to the place where the dance party was held, the party-only campus of a private high school with amazing tuition. You can understand why the tuition fee of this high school is so by listening to the prefix of this campus. Taller. A fairly pleasant conversation let the three of Kraft pass away the boring time when they were on the road. It's exaggerated. After arriving at his destination, Kraft looked at the so-called party-only campus in front of him and slapped his lips with all kinds of envy and hatred. Since it is a dance party, there is a ballroom. It is not the kind of dance hall, but the kind of banquet hall used by the upper class that Kraft only sees in film and television dramas. In addition, there is a large green space outside the ballroom, equipped with a diving platform and a swimming pool with a waterline, and even a racecourse behind. Kraft glanced at the student who was in charge of the reception who was introducing him here. The arrogance and contempt in his eyes did not hide at all. When introducing him, he also had a tone of, "You haven't seen the world." The three of Kraft were very upset, and even Francisco, who had always been smiling and welcoming people, stretched out a face. In fact, the past exchange dance party did not use such an exaggerated venue. This dance party is plainly an activity where the descendants of a group of so-called superior people expand their contacts with each other, but whenever there are untouchables like Kraft when they want to become a new member, they will use similar methods to give the new member a good start. If they can make them happy, then it does not matter to add an interesting follower. If they find it meaningless, they will not send an invitation next time. Letter. Regarding this matter, in fact, the principal of Fantas also mentioned to Kraft and the others vaguely. At the time, Kraft did not pay much attention to it, because the principal said, "You may be a little unaccustomed to attending for the first time. Maybe it will be rejected by some people." Kraft thinks that the so-called rejection means ignoring them and not talking to them. After all, it is upper society, and should be a little demeanor. But I didn't expect this group of guys to be no different from those street gangsters. Kraft lowered his eyes in silence. He didn't want to come here. Since they are not welcome here, he naturally has no interest in maintaining a superficial peace. Anyway, the principal did not say that he must join them. He just said to come and see you. Meet the world. It is indeed an eye-opener. The student who was in charge of the introduction wanted to take them inside and continue to see the world. But Kraft was not interested in continuing to listen to him being weird in that yin and yang. He turned directly away from the team and headed for the banquet hall. Go. Even if you want to leave, you have to fill your stomach before you leave. Kraft is a thrifty, great guy. Before Kraft and the others arrived, the people in other schools were almost there. After all, bullying newcomers is a rare activity for their group, so they all ran early to watch the show. At the moment I saw Kraft, Tay left the team and walked to the banquet hall, suddenly agitated. They are happy to see the resistance of the newcomers. The echo worms are too common in their daily lives. Only by bullying a dignified hard bone like Kraft can they feel more fulfilled. In the banquet hall, the leaders of several small groups winked at each other, and after a silent exchange, one of the leaders and several of his followers came out more and more, and walked towards Kraft. "Are you Kraft?" The man in the lead raised his head, imitating his father's way of talking with people at the banquet, and seemed to introduce himself to Kraft with restraint. "My name is Slade Hammer, and I am glad to meet you." Kraft took a sip of juice, helped his throat swallow the stuffed snack, and curled his lips. "You're too happy." Then, before the stunned Slade recovered, Kraft continued to sarcastically, "Your performance is not even as good as the third-rate actors in the trash hours on TV. No matter how elegant you are, your inferior nouveau riche can't be concealed. Temperament." What nouveau riche temperament Kraft definitely can't tell, but in his opinion, this group of people are big dogs anyway. It's right to scold the nouveau riche, but he didn't expect him to scold it. Slade Hammer's father is the president of Hanmer Industries. As a newly emerging consortium in recent years, Hanmer Industries is indeed a nouveau riche in the eyes of those established consortia, otherwise Slade would not come out to find Clough. It was very troublesome. At the moment, the descendants of those old chables all sat firmly on the diautai and watched the show in the distance. Slade's face twitched, and he managed to maintain the smile on his face. He gritted his teeth and said, "Jealousy is the original sin, classmate Kraft. I can understand how ordinary people like you see the exquisite life of the upper class. That kind of uneasy feeling, but it's not necessary. I really don't have to resist it. I just came to make friends with you. It has nothing to do with whether your family is rich or not." Speaking of the back, Slade gradually regained his initial sense of superiority, and pointed at Kraft in a bird's-eye attitude. However, upon hearing Slade's words, Kraft laughed out. Sure enough, he is a nouveau riche. Although the news reports have been suppressed, the name Martin Lee should not be unknown in your circle. Right? After Martin Lee came out to help him with the related procedures of the agency lock, Kraft also went to learn about the financial strength of his adoptive father, and then discovered that nearly 80% of the industries in New York's Chinatown are related to Martin, and more than half of them are related to Martin. Martin's industry is dominated by Martin, so Martin Lee has a place even in the wealthy New York financial circle, and this Slade doesn't know the situation of his family. Obviously the nouveau riche he said before should it's a crooked hit. Slade's face changed drastically when he heard this. Although Hanmer Industries and Martin Lee's industries did not have much intersection, he had heard of the name. Was pitted. Slade, who had long been accustomed to intrigue, quickly reacted. He turned to look at the guys who had encouraged him to get ahead, and saw that they were getting together at the moment, talking in a low voice, and noticed Slade. After his gaze, Chi showed a mocking smile at him, and the others were also laughing at him in a low voice. Slade, who had lost his face, couldn't stay any longer, apologized to Kraft with a dark face, and then left with his followers embarrassed. It looks like it was being used as a gun. An idiot. Kraft curled his lips and continued to taste the food on the table. Not to mention the attitude of the bastards, the food prepared was delicious, and it shouldn't be wasted. If Kraft was the only one, he would definitely pat his butt and leave after filling his stomach, and was too lazy to spend time with this group of boring guys. But Francesco and Amy are also passing with him. Kraft does not need to make false claims with these people. It does not mean that the two of them do not need this opportunity to expand their contacts. Other ethnic groups are in America. Life is hard, and not everyone is as extreme as Kraft. It was also after a lot of experience that Kraft realized that people deal with problems differently, so he has now learned to try not to interfere with other people's choices with his own likes and dislikes. Unfortunately, even if Kraft wanted to spend this time quietly, others didn't give him this opportunity. Martin Lee is indeed a financial tycoon now, but his skin color determines that he is destined to be unable to penetrate into the circle of whites, and Martin's power is basically limited to Chinatown. So in the eyes of the rich and old, Martin's status is even worse. The ugly hammer had just appeared before. So when the vanguard of Slade Hammer lost, someone soon came forward to tease Kraft, who was wandering around to eat. Hey! What weight loss refrigerator of yours, can you build muscles like mine? A sturdy white man blocked Kraft's way. He proudly bulged the biceps on his arms in a very rude manner. Why don't you buy one and try it yourself? I don't think you look like you can't afford it, or do you spend all your pocket money on buying protein powder? The other party is so rude, Kraft will naturally not give a good face. He looked at the muscles in front of him and curled his lips in disdain. Regardless of the muscles of this guy, Kraft is not afraid of him if he really fights. He used to fight with those street gangsters when he was out wandering with Martin Lee. I've learned a lesson, and I'll be confused when I see a little blood. Just be careful not to be knocked down by him at the very beginning. What's more, he still has the technology products in his dream to defend himself. Kraft touched the wristband on his hand. This is an arm strength wristband that he has improved based on the foot strength shoes. He has tested it, and after turning it on, it looks like he is playing with Fatty Liao with one hand. I won't spend wrong money on your deceptive toys. Muscle Stick deliberately raised his voice, making a look of irritation, and then screamed out the lines that were probably prepared a long time ago. We don't welcome liars here. Don't think that your a little fame is a big shot. It's true or false. If you want to find the difference, you can say that this roundabout way of provocation is not suitable for you, a stupid big person. Your intelligence is not enough to complete such a complicated job. The performance of the idiot's spicy eyes made Kraft completely lose his patience, and he simply turned to the crowd of onlookers. If you want to make trouble, can't you find two smarter guys? Or do you only have this kind of idiot here? That's really disappointing. Kraft gave a thumbs up and nodded the muscular stick behind him, sarcastically. Who are you, stupid? You yellow monkey. The angry muscular stick reached out and grabbed Kraft's shoulder. Kraft, who had been prepared for a long time, bent over and turned around, dodges the palm of the muscular stick, and kicked his abdomen, but this muscular stick was in the same body. The muscles weren't for nothing. Kraft kicked it up, like it was kicking on a car tire. The muscular stick just took 2 steps back. If nothing happened, he patted the dust on his stomach, and laughed. It doesn't hurt at all. Don't you all Chinese people know how to do it? Just jumping around like a monkey. The one. It's just a few words over and over again. I'm so tired of hearing it. Kraft dug his ears with a look of disgust. Don't you group of white-skinned pigs have any new words? Oh. So, after all, in total, you only have a history of more than 200 years. Even the language has been inherited from Great Britain. I am asking too much. While going back tit for tat, Kraft quietly turned on the switch hidden under his two-handed wristbands. Although his own strength is not worthy of the muscle stick in front of him, the difference in physical fitness lies there, even if he can win. He was also hurt a little too, and Kraft didn't think such a fool was qualified to be hurt for him. See if I won't kill you, yellow-skinned monkey. Muscle Stick slammed Kraft with his fist, still cursing. As soon as he saw the way the muscular club punched, Kraft laughed. Not only did this man have no actual combat experience, but he also didn't learn boxing skills, but the charging speed was not slow. He probably played some rugby. Confrontational sports such as ice hockey, it is no wonder that the group of dudes will be pushed out as guns. This kind of direct attack is best dealt with. You can get out of it with a slight lower body, but Kraft, whose arms are blessed by scientific power, gave up evasion, and chose to face the muscle stick. Kraft quickly grabbed the fist that was thrown towards his head, and abruptly stopped the movement of the muscle stick, and then his lower body remained motionless, but the hand that grabbed the muscle stick fist randomly flicked to the side. The muscular man, who was 2 heads higher than Kraft and a few laps bigger than him, was thrown by Kraft several meters away and fell on the lawn next to him for a long time without being able to get up. Kung Fu. Have you seen it now? Kraft slapped his palms twice easily, and put his hands behind his back as the Grandmaster-level figures in the martial arts movies, with a calm expression. The previous group of students who were whispering and waiting for a good show were stunned. Kraft's counterattack obviously exceeded their expectations. After an awkward silence, the security guard who had not seen the track, and gave him a surprise at first. Kraft and the person in charge who led the way finally didn't know where they got out. What happened here? Who is making trouble? The person in charge pretended to yell, and then stared sharply at Kraft, who was surrounded by the center, trying to put a little pressure on him. However, Kraft didn't cooperate with him at all. While finishing the cuffs that were already neat, he looked back at him with a smile. After looking at Kraft for a while, the person in charge found that the eye offensive he had learned from his elders had no effect. He had to withdraw his gaze in a hesitant manner, and then turned his head and shouted at the 2 security guards behind him. Why are you still stunned? Hurry up and send Lewis to treatment. The security guards here have long been accustomed to the mess that these young ladies make from time to time, and they don't deal with similar things once or twice, but who makes the school pay a high salary. After responding casually, the 2 security guards walked to Lewis, who was lying on the ground pretending to be dizzy because of his embarrassment, and tacitly racked him up from left to right, and walked outside. At the same time, a senior boy came out from behind the student who was in charge of reception. He had an elegant temperament in his gestures, which was clearly different from the upstart of Hanmer. The arrogant person in charge in front of featuring showed a doggy smile when he appeared, and quickly stepped aside to let him make his debut. I'm very sorry. Lewis is an idiot with only muscles in his head. I apologize to you for him. The man walked up to Kraft and leaned slightly. Phelim Jones, the 11th grade student of Dalston Elite Private High School and also the president of the student union, is fortunate to be in charge of this dance party. Dalston Elite Private High School, the party-only campus where Kraft and the others are now, belongs to this high school. To put it simply, it is the host of this prom. It's okay, I won't suffer anyway. Kraft shrugged his shoulders and replied without a smile. It's just that the methods are a bit naive, which disappoints me a bit. Phelim's smile remained the same, and he pushed back. After all, there are so many participating schools, right? I'm just Dalston's student chairperson. I can't control the thoughts of other school students, although I don't welcome it either. You're interim students, but we still have basic etiquette in Dalston. Papa. Kraft applauded softly and sighed. If you let others do bad things, you just need to watch the show and wait for the good show. You are much shameless than the upstart before. Kraft believes that Phelim has no plans to find fault with him, but does he need to find fault? Among this group of so-called elites, it is much more troublesome to find himself and his party. He does not need to take the initiative to leave the stage. As the host of this prom, he has made it clear that he has not stopped the actions of other people. My own position. What basic etiquette is still talking to him? Kraft sneered, ignored the cheeky guy in front of him, and went on wandering around. Senior Phelim, this kid is too ignorant of good and bad. Do you need someone to teach him a lesson? The students in charge of receiving Kraft and the others leaned in front of Phelim, angrily showing loyalty, and by the way, he wanted to use Phelim's hand to give himself a sigh. From his point of view, he was in a confrontation with Kraft's eyes. It is a shame to lose the battle. If given a chance, he naturally wants to win back a city. This person's careful thoughts can't be concealed from Phelim, but he didn't say anything, but waved his hand indifferently. We won't have any intersection from now on. There is no need to find another enemy for ourselves. Most of the students who were watching the play coincided with Phelim's ideas. They have seen the play, and Kraft has also shown his toughness and strength. If the trouble continues, it is likely that he will be involved, and they too. they all chose to calm down like Phelim. This group of core members settled down, and the guys who pointed to them to beg for life would naturally no longer be boring. The scene of Kraft throwing Lewis out with one hand was quite bluffing. As a result, the three people who had been onlookers were immediately isolated. When Francisco and Amy saw this, they also put out their thoughts in the circle of this group of people, and followed Kraft to experience the life of the noble school. Again, without waiting for the ball to officially start, I left early. After the unpleasant dance party, Kraft's life finally returned to the right track, but because Tony Stark brought himself a series of troubles with a casual sentence, he was already marked in Kraft's heart. The label of troublemaker, if possible, Kraft no longer wants to have more intersection with him. The sales of Chaosho mechanism locks gradually stabilized after the heat subsided. Although Tony Stark said that mechanism locks are more interesting than Rubik's Cube, they are still far less popular than Rubik's Cube, but they are here. Earning money in a period of time was enough for Kraft to start trying some more complicated inventions. Failed again. Looking at the pile of scrap iron in front of him, Kraft put down his tools in frustration. Although the funds are in place, Kraft's own knowledge and experience can't keep up. Even if he repeats the steps in his dream step by step, he will always make mistakes in some stages that require meticulous operation. Even if you can successfully make one or two pieces with good luck occasionally, the success rate is still not high in the second production. Sure enough. Are you still too anxious? Kraft sat cross-legged on the ground and began to reflect on the reasons for his recent failure. Because the funds were in place, he asked Martin for help as soon as his head got hot. He set up a private workshop again and bought a lot of production tools, but in fact he was not familiar with these equipment at all. It's normal. The steps are too big, it's an egg. Kraft couldn't help but think of this common saying. After trying to understand it, he temporarily put aside those overly complicated inventions, intending to try some inventions in dreams that he could barely understand, and then step by step, slowly improving his technology. After finding the right method, Kraft's success rate has finally improved, and the progress he has made is much greater than the pure copy before, which makes him more addicted to his laboratory. Most of the free space-time is soaking in here. Back home, Kraft threw his school bag on the sofa, thinking about running to his small workshop, but Martin Lee suddenly sprang out of it. Don't be busy, tell you something. Are you at home? Martin Lee is a busy man. He usually goes out early and returns late. He often doesn't always come back when Kraft sleeps. Originally, Kraft was still distressed by Martin's hard work, but he accidentally discovered his nightclub VIP card. Later, Kraft began to urge him to find a company for himself. Martin Lee went home early, definitely for his reasons. I have something to do these days, and I need to travel far away. It will take about 10 days to come back. I called roar to your Uncle Liao. Just go and eat directly. Oh, got it. Kraft waved his hand. Martin would travel far away from time to time. He had long been used to it. The friendship between him and Fatty Liao was constantly getting stronger in the midst of feasting. There is another thing. Aunt May's birthday will be 3 days later. Aunt May wants to invite you to her birthday party at her house. Kraft would naturally not refuse Aunt May's invitation, but he wanted to make a gift for Aunt May in 3 days. It is probably too late, and the strange inventions in the dreamland are not suitable to be honest. Give it to Aunt May. Fortunately, now Kraft is rich and wealthy, it is not difficult to buy a reliable gift. After Martin Lee finished his account, he hurried out, and Kraft gave up his plan to go to a private workshop to continue his research, and ran to Fatty Lau's house. He was going to give Aunt May a set of kitchenware. Fatty Lau's family owned a restaurant, so it's okay to ask him as a staff member. Fatty Liao went to the store to choose a complete set of kitchenware. After packing them in a gift box, the two returned to Fumanlu to eat an authentic Chinese meal, and stayed at Fatty Lau's home to play video games with him for a while. It wasn't until the sky was completely dark that Kraft wandered back home with the gift he had prepared for Aunt May. After a brief wash, Kraft went back to his room and fell asleep. Then he dreamed of Dr. Akasa after a long absence. Kraft's dreams seemed to evolve, from being broken at the very beginning to being gradually complete later, from being awake and unclear to remembering the content, to being able to remember the entire dream, and now to be able to stay awake in the dream. And you can browse and use the items that appear in the dream at will. It's just that Kraft's range of activities is limited, he can't leave the protagonist of the dream too far, and the items he gets from the dream do not affect the use of the characters in the dream, but like a copy of a projection onto his hand. Dr. Ari's laboratory Kraft has long been familiar with, whether it's the various inventions he piled aside, the piles of scientific magazines and various materials on the bookshelf, and a small number of mystery novels. Take advantage of Dr. Ali's break while flipping through it. So this time he didn't scurry around, but stood calmly next to Dr. Ari, watching what he was messing up with. This is a tape recorder. After Kraft saw the items in Dr. Ali's hands, he was completely relieved. Dr. Ali's invention is much more practical than handmade, but it often explodes. Although Kraft will not be bombed. But that kind of sudden explosion was not very friendly to his little heart. I saw that Dr. AKA removed all the main components of the tape recorder, installed it in a new, smaller case, and then stuffed it into a bow. Kraft watched the fat doctor add external speakers and controllers to the bow in his hand, scratching his head frantically. What does Dr. Ari want to do? Isn't it another detective item for that kid named Shinichi? Although he had never seen the kid named Shinichi, Dr. Ali had several calls with him during the production process, so Kraft probably knew that there was such a kid. Anesthesia watch, foot power enhancing shoes, tracking glasses, and detective badges, etc., were all invented by Dr. AKA for him. I have to say that Dr. Ali is really fond of that kid named Shinichi. After making the bow tie, which was probably used for recording, Dr. AKA turned on the old computer beside him and started typing the code. Huh? Need to type code? So this thing is not a pure recording device? Kraft thought at first that what Dr. Ari was going to do was something similar to a voice recorder, but it was right to think about it. If it's just a secret recording device, then just use the voice recorder. Leaning his head in front of the screen, Kraft looked at the string of codes that Dr. Ali had typed out. His programming skills were quite good, and it was not difficult to understand these codes. Kraft's procedural skills can be extraordinarily outstanding, thanks to Fatty Liao, a pig teammate who is still addicted to food. After he played a video game together, Kraft gave Liao angrily. Fatty wrote a cheating software, and since then, as long as there is something that Fatty Liao can't play, he will ask for Kraft, and there are more and more shit things. What is too strong will weaken the game experience. It's best to be a fool-like plugin that can be adjusted independently. The role of this game is too ugly. Give me a mod that can easily change the skin. After all, he is a little friend who has been in his house all year round. Kraft basically met the requirements of this rookie, and his own programming skills have been honed in this way. Audio recording. Audio track analysis. Audio adjustment. Kraft roughly understood the function of this program. Simply put, it was a program of sound recording and imitating, but what's the point of this? Kraft continued to scratch his head frantically. Dr. Ari's code is actually not too complicated. The main track analysis link is not much different from the software used to compare the sound to determine the master. The sound can be imitated. There is a 3-4 imaging that is the sky. But Kraft thought about it again. This thing is probably a toy for the kid named Shinyi. A 3-4 image is enough, but it's a little bit lax compared to the previous inventions. It's another useless invention, probably only used as video material. Kraft thought with disappointment. Dr. Ali's invention often pulls the hips. After careful calculation, the props for children to play detective games are the most practical, but now there is finally a useless detective prop. Just as Kraft thought about it, Dr. Ali had already installed the written program into the bow tie onomatopoeia, then opened a video on the computer, and collected a recording from it for testing. Ahem. Hello, my name is Dr. Ali. Dr. AKA put the bow tie to his mouth and spoke. Kraft. What just happened? Kraft dug out his ears hard, and looked at the bow in Dr. Akasa's hand with an incredible expression. The sound from the bow just now is not only 30 to 40% similar as Kraft estimated, but one sample. Is that a lie? Kraft's worldview was hit. Unlike some inventions that are not within the scope of his knowledge, Kraft can understand all the steps of this bow tie onomatopoeia. It is precisely because he can understand that he finds it incredible. According to Dr. Ali's production method, this onomatopoeia is absolutely impossible to have such an effect. This unscientific. Kraft suddenly sat up from the bed. After the things were made, the dream naturally ended. However, Kraft woke up still as if he was in a dream, with a confused look on his face. No, I have to practice. Raising the quilt abruptly, Kraft quickly changed his clothes, and then ran to his private workshop. At the moment's genius has just been darkened, but many people in Chinatown have already got up, and they are out of stalls and sports. When they saw Kraft running all the way, they all showed surprised expressions. Yo! Isn't this Martin's doll? You actually got up so early today? Grandpa and Grandma, who were getting together in the morning exercises one after another, attacked Kraft, roar. After Kraft stopped and greeted them politely, he replied, "It's just that I suddenly got some inspiration and went to the laboratory to do some experiments. I already knew that your kid would have a great future." An old grandfather slapped Kraft on the shoulder, grinned and praised, then turned his head to brag to his old friends. "What did I say back then? This kid Kraft looks like a smart baby, you still don't believe it. Bah. Lao Zhang, do you want to be shameless? It was Xiao Li who repaired the radio for you at the time. You didn't want to pay the labor fee and just said casually, 'I don't know what kind of character you stingy like.' Yeah, yes, right. Lao Zhang, what are you pretending to be? And I still remember, in the end you really didn't pay for it." A group of old men didn't show the face of Old Man Zhang. They took down the stage one after another. Old Man Zhang naturally refused to give up, dropped Kraft, and began to fight against the Confucians with great momentum. "Don't worry about those stupid old men." An old grandmother with a big red fan pours Kraft to her side. "You have not eaten breakfast yet, baby. Here, this is the rice cake made by Grandma. You can use it to cushion your stomach." "Just eating rice cakes and choking, I still have a bottle of milk." Another old grandma also came over and handed a bottle of milk, and several other old ladies also contributed their food. "Thank you, Grandma." Kraft didn't be polite with them either. He took the food, put them all in one bag, and waved goodbye to a few old grannies. "I rushed to the laboratory, so I left first. What a good boy, if only my grandson is half as good as him. Yeah. I heard that this kid made a lot of money by making things, and even the TV station went to their school for interviews. Good looking, gentle and gentle. How do you say that word? Bookish. Yes, just like the great wits of ancient times. No, such a good young man. I can't let go. I have to call Martin someday. Let's talk and see if we can have a family. You are so beautiful. Your fat granddaughter, I think it is more suitable for the Liao boy. Kraft wants to be my grandson-in-law." After the group of old men, the old ladies also quarreled because of Kraft. And Kraft, who had already left, didn't know that he had many more fiancées inexplicably. At the moment, he had already brought the food in his hand to his private workshop. But now Kraft didn't mind what to eat for breakfast, so he put the food on the side table. He pulled out a tape recorder from the pile of materials and began to disassemble it. Because there is no bow tie at hand, Kraft directly made the sound device into a trumpet shape. After getting it done, he turned on the computer on the table, recalled the code written by Dr. Ali in the dream, and kept it verbatim. Knocked up. When everything was finished, Kraft learned that Dr. Ali also clicked on a video, recorded a sound ray from it, and then put the small speaker in his hand to his mouth. "Hello, how are you? My name is Kraft Lee. F*K. This is actually true. I heard my own voice after being changed, which was exactly the same as the sound source in the video, and the Kraft people were stupid. This is unscientific." Putting his fingers deep into his hair, Kraft's thinking fell into chaos. In retrospect, the foot-strengthening shoes seem to be very abnormal. Just relying on the electric current to stimulate the muscles, you can throw a strong man who is more than 100 and nearly 200 pounds out for several meters with one hand, and there is no side effect. This seems too exaggerated, but Kraft doesn't know much about bioengineering, so he didn't notice this before. So, what mysterious attributes does Dr. Ari's world actually have? After thinking about it for a long time, Kraft could only guess like that. He hadn't dreamt of similar technological worlds blessed by other special powers. It was just that the special powers of those worlds were more obvious, and Dr. Ari's this was too hidden. Deep, he always thought it was the same ordinary world as here. So, in fact, I can also master those mysterious powers? Thinking of this, Kraft became excited again. He has been greedy for a long time with the mysterious products of Taoism, magic, etc. that appeared in his dreams, but because he didn't know how to cultivate immortality in magic, he had always watched it as a movie. That's it. But now it's different. Since Dr. Aha's magical power Kraft can be replicated, doesn't it mean that the means of flying into the sky in the dream can also be learned? Although Kraft hasn't tried those mysterious methods before and failed, maybe it's just not the time before. As if his dreams are constantly evolving, maybe he can master these magical powers now. Kraft couldn't wait to dig out a mechanism Bird made before, and then recalled the runes and spells used to activate the mechanism in the Mohist school. Then he picked up the carving knife and carefully sealed the runes on it. Then he said the words, think, talk, tell, move, ha. Learning the actions of the children of the Mo family in the dream, Kraft shouted and pointed his finger at the mechanism Bird on the table. The mechanism Bird is motionless, and there is no sound and light effect like that in the dream. Why failed? Kraft reluctantly tried a few more times, but unfortunately, no matter whether it was the mechanism bird he made before or his new mechanism dog, there was no response. Damn it. Did I guess wrong? Or does it mean that the Mohist government is not supported on America's land? Kraft, who didn't intend to give up easily, changed his mind and tried magic. And he also guessed that maybe this way of using mysterious power to bless him could not be mastered temporarily. It had to be like Dr. Lee's invention that he could directly make a finished product. Kraft recalled that the only option in the magic system that can meet the conditions seems to be the option of refining potions. Although there are basically alternative tools in the laboratory, it is best to try to do this kind of magical things. It fits the original equipment in the dreamland, and there are no materials for refining potions, so I have to repurchase it. It's no use worrying now, let's fill up your stomach first. Kraft touched his stomach that was making noises, and finally calmed down. After tossing for so long, it was almost noon. Not only did he not eat breakfast, he even ran away from the morning class. While taking out the food presented by the old ladies, Kraft made a call to Fatty Liao. Hey, David, it's me. Kraft was chewing on the rice cake and said vaguely. I forgot the time when I did the experiment. I just remembered that there is still class today, but the experiment hasn't been finished yet, and I won't pass this afternoon. You help me ask the teacher for leave. Even if there is no such thing as Tony Stark before, with Martin Lee as the manager alone, Kraft doesn't need to care too much about the school rules, but he is not the kind of person who doesn't know what is good or bad, so he will still call Liao. The fat man confessed. After the phone call, Kraft quickly swept away the food, and then went out non-stop to buy the tools and materials needed to refine the potion. The tools for making potions are not complicated, but most of the materials used in potions are magical creature materials that Kraft has never heard of before. He picked and selected for a long time before he found one. To get the potion of materials on the earth, Kraft wandered all over Chinatown, and finally went to a crawling pet store to get all the materials. Dried toad, lizard's tail, ink ghost umbrella. According to the order, Kraft put the materials one by one into a simple crucible. Crucibles are an indispensable part of many chemical experiments, so Kraft does not lack crucibles, but the crucibles used in modern science and the crucibles in the magical world of the Middle Ages are quite different. Just in case, Kraft Swift still went to find a similar crucible, which was found in the antique shop under Martin's name. According to the pharmaceutical steps in the dreamland, Kraft stirred while still learning the witch-chanting words. It took more than an hour and finally the potion named Smoothing Potion was boiled and completed. Pour the liquid medicine into the prepared beaker. Kraft took off the mask on his face and fell into thought. My brain heated up to refine the potion, so now the problem is, who should I drink this thing for? Kraft moved his nose to the edge of the beaker and sniffed slightly. Vomit. The smell that went straight to Tinling Guy made him almost spit out all the food he ate at noon. That's not right. The smooth potion in the dream is not like this. In Kraft's dream, the smoothing potion was used by the witch lady to beautify her skin. After refining it, she couldn't wait to drink it. At that time, Kraft also touched her finger with her finger because of curiosity. I tasted the remaining liquid medicine. Although it tasted a bit weird, it was definitely not as rancid as the one in front of me. It looks like it failed again. Kraft had been mentally building for a long time, but still didn't have the courage to try the weird liquid in front of him, and finally poured it into the waste disposal bucket. Happy for nothing. In addition to the potion, Kraft did not give up on testing the magical creations in other dreams, but the results were still not ideal. The tired and paralyzed Kraft lay on the floor of the laboratory, sighing helplessly. So those inventions of Dr. Ari are really pure scientific creations? The creation of mysterious power cannot be replicated, which means that the foot-strengthening shoes and bow tie onomatopoeia do not contain any mysterious power. Is it because of the different physical rules in different worlds? Then why can I copy it? Although it is a good thing to be able to master this strange power, Kraft is still very curious about the specific reasons for this situation. He wants to find someone to test whether only he can make such an unscientific scientific creation, but so doing so is likely to expose his own special features, and Kraft has no plans to spread these more magical props, so he finally chose to give up and continue to investigate. 3 days passed quickly, and Kraft brought the gift for Aunt May and hitchhiked to Queens. Aunt May, happy birthday. Walking into the Parker's yard and handing the present to Peter Parker, Kraft stepped forward to hug Aunt May, and then called roar to the middle-aged man next to her. Uncle Ben, long time no see. Hello, Kraft. Benjamin Parker stepped forward and patted him on the shoulder, and said with a smile, I saw your news on TV some time ago and it really scared me. Kraft curled his lips. It wasn't the trouble-seeking fellow Stark, I'm almost annoyed to death. Hey. How can you say that, Mr. Stark? Peter Parker was on the sidelines for his idol. Why can't you say that he is not my idol? He is a big trouble for me, nothing more. But your products are sold so much because of Mr. Stark's promotion. Peter Parker spoke plausibly. Oh? Do you think our family will be short of that little money? Kraft lifted his chin with a look of disdain. The way you are now is really annoying. Kraft. You have become the way you hate the most. Yes, because I just learned how Tony Stark is usually. Kraft shrugged, mocking. Look, after removing the fan filter, you actually hate Tony Stark too. It's not the same at all, Peter Parker retorted stiffly. At this time, Aunt May came over and played round the field. She supported Kraft on the shoulder and pushed him into the house. Okay, don't bully Peter anymore, come and taste my apple pie. Oh, well, I am a 7th grade kid who bullies an 11th grade older kid. It's really a bit ugly. Kraft spread his hands and walked into the house following Aunt May's strength. Go, Peter, come with me to get the grill out. Uncle Ben patted Peter on the back as a comfort and then dragged him into it. Oh. Look who this is. Our little genius Kraft Lee. As soon as he entered the room, the fat Ned Liz ran over, shaking his fat body, shouting loudly in an exaggerated tone. Kraft is still relatively friendly to this fat man who is also Asian. He stretched out his hand and slapped Ned, and then humbled. Come on, Ned, the technical content of the things I made is not counted. Hi, haven't a lot of imitation products already appeared? America's copyright law is already very strict, but capitalists can always find loopholes in it. After the agency lock was caught on fire by Stark, various puzzle-solving locks that were similar but different soon appeared, and a compulsive fitness equipment similar to a treadmill. But none of them were recruited by the famous Tony Stark, did they? Oh, don't be kidding. Kraft rolled his eyes. Do you really think Tony Stark looks at me differently? He just said it casually. Kraft, who doesn't have a fan filter, is still sober. With Tony Stark's inconspicuous character, he might forget his name after the interview. Talking to Ned and walking into the living room, Kraft picked up a piece of apple pie made by Aunt May and looked at the others in the living room as he ate it. A few familiar faces should be the staff in the asylum, and there are 2 or 3 who don't know each other. Maybe they are friends of Uncle Ben, but there is no one else. It seems that there are not many people. Kraft swallowed the apple pie in his hand and looked at Ned with some wonder. With the good character of Aunt May and Uncle Ben, the friend should be more than that. Martin had done 2 for Aunt May in the asylum before. Back to the birthday party. Which time is it not the loud gongs and drums, firecrackers, red flags, crowds of people? Ned replied irritably, Peter's house is so big, can it invite so many people to stand? Well, I'm the one who made the fool. Kraft patted his forehead, then looked around. What about Mary? Why didn't she come? Mary's full name is Mary Jane Watson. In addition to being Peter's neighbor, classmate and crush, she is also the niece of Aunt May's friend Anna Watson. So logically, she should also attend Aunt May's birthday party. It is said that Aunt May gave Peter the task of inviting Mary, and then, you know. Ned shrugged and said helplessly, oh. Kraft narrowed his eyes and showed a sly fox smile. There is a saying in China that it is not as rude to call distant relatives as good as neighbors, but Aunt May doesn't call Mary on her birthday. Talk to Peter about this. Ned shook his head and picked up the 4th piece of apple pie, which was the amount Kraft saw when he came in, and he must have eaten less before then. Reaching out and patted Ned's big belly, Kraft exclaimed, when I see you, I seem to see David's future. David. Oh, that's the one who opened the restaurant at home. Ned licked his lips, and quickly recalled the identity of Fatty Liao. The food in their house is really delicious. It's too expensive. Wait. Didn't we just talk about Mary Jane? Why did we talk about my figure again? Ned slapped Kraft's hand that was harassing his belly and took a deep breath, trying to make his belly look less round, but unfortunately, he failed. What Mary Jane? Hearing the name he cared about, Peter, who was busy, quickly leaned over, and then stared at Kraft with a vigilant look. Don't mess around. Kraft. Why am I messing up? Kraft retorted bluntly. Will you be messing up when you call Mary to the party? Peter's face flushed all of a sudden, and he squeezed. But, will it be too late to inform her now? Kraft looked at the tens of thousands who were willing to hesitation with contempt. Who was the reason for the delay? Huh. Peter Parker hid his face in shame and fled. Ned shook his head helplessly and sighed. The character of his friend was indeed a little weaker. He was actually bullied to death by children 4 or 5 years younger than him. Let's go. Kraft tugged at Ned's arm. Let's call Mary here. If you call Mary, can't you be alone? Anyway, it's next door. While Ned was talking, he kept his eyes on Uncle Ben, who was walking outside carrying raw meat steaks and hot dogs, and swallowed saliva from time to time. You're so fat. Forget it. Kraft said with a black line on his forehead. Really not going? Then don't say I won't take you to play. Huh. Are you planning to pit Peter again? Ned pulled his attention away from the barbecue and looked at Kraft with a serious face. As Peter's friend, Ned has seen how the bear boy in front of him changed ways to bully Peter, and he took a deep breath when he thought that Peter would be pitted by Kraft again. Be sure to bring me. Kraft craned his neck and looked around. Peter was being grabbed by Uncle Ben to help at this time, and he didn't pay attention to this side. Then he grabbed Ned's arm and quickly ran outside. The two ran out of Parker's house and walked back to the downstairs of Mary's house. Ned watched Kraft take out a file-size electric horn from his pocket, fiddled with it a few times, and put it to his mouth. Hi, Ned, it's me, Peter Parker, your best friend. From the electric horn, it was Peter Parker's voice. Great gift, Crab. Ned's fat face squeezed out an exaggerated expression, and he snatched the horn in Kraft's hand, brought it to his mouth and tried to say a few times. I, Peter Parker, are Ned Liz's most loyal little brother. Wow. This thing is amazing. Kraft, your kid is such a genius. Ned reluctantly played with the electric horn in his hand and gave Kraft a thumbs up. Reaching out and taking back the onomatopoeia horn in Ned's hand, Kraft adjusted the loudness to the maximum, then pointed the horn at Mary Jane's house and shouted in Peter's voice, Mary, I miss you. Mary, I think you can't sleep if you want to. After yelling, Kraft quickly put away the onomatopoeia and ran away. Ned was taken aback for a moment, and quickly followed him. The amplified voice not only alarmed Mary Jane, who was resting in the house, but also alarmed Peter Parker, who was slapping Uncle Ben and Aunt May. Who is it? Actually confessing to Mary. Peter Parker felt nervous. When a person was speaking, the voice he heard was somewhat different from the voice heard by others, so he did not hear that the voice just now was actually his own voice. But Uncle Ben and Aunt May are familiar with Peter's voice. Peter, the one just now, it seems to be your voice, right? Uncle Ben scratched his head questioningly, and subconsciously reached out and touched Peter in front of him. He still hasn't realized what is going on. My voice? Although the young Peter was persuaded, there was no problem with his intelligence. Even his intelligence was much higher than that of ordinary people, so he quickly figured out the cause and effect. Kraft. Peter Parker dropped his work and ran towards Mary Jane's house. Then happened to hit Mary Jane, who pushed open the window and probed to look out. Peter? Mary Jane with red hair raised her eyebrows, her expression seemed to be smiling. She and Peter Parker are classmates even if they are neighbors, and their elders are still best friends, so they are very familiar with each other. Mary can naturally detect Peter's good feelings for herself, but this guy can't hold a fart for a long time. Are you so bold today? No. It's not like this. That. At this moment, Peter Parker seemed to be caught in the biggest crisis of his more than 10 years of life. Come on. Peter. Confess to Mary. At the corner of the street, Ned stuck out a half of his fat face and looked at Peter, who was stunned and bewildered, and kept cheering him on in a low voice. Don't bother in vain, Peter's bullshit, you may not even be able to say the whole thing in front of Mary. Kraft folded his arms and leaned against the wall mockingly. The development of things is just like Kraft said. After Peter hesitated for a long time, he finally calmed down. No, that voice was a prank by Kraft just now. Peter waved his hands in a panic, explaining to Mary Jane, who was smiling with both hands on the windowsill. Although I don't know how he did it, I really didn't do it. Kraft? After listening to Peter's explanation with a smile, Mary stretched out her hand and stroked her long red hair, with a more smile on her face. Because of the relationship between Aunt May and Peter, she and Kraft are familiar, especially Kraft. From time to time, using her own name to tease Peter, Mary not only doesn't feel annoyed, but finds it very funny. Mary Jane actually has some good feelings for Peter Parker, but his unique character makes Mary very unhappy. The experience of her childhood made her very insecure. No matter how good Peter is, he still has such a character. Mary could not be his girlfriend. This is also the reason why Kraft used her to molest Peter. Not only did she not get angry, but sometimes she cooperated deliberately. Yes, it's him. Peter nodded his head frantically, and finally did not forget to take this opportunity to invite Mary Jane to Aunt May's birthday party. Actually, today is Aunt May's birthday. He invited you to the birthday party for me. It is a pity that this opportunity is not very good. So, if it wasn't for him to come to the prank, you wouldn't plan to notify me, would you? Mary Jane frowned and made an angry look. In fact, she was also a little angry. Regardless of her relationship with Peter, she had always respected the elders of Aunt May. She didn't want to be because of this. The reason was absent from her birthday party. Ah. No. I just forgot to inform you temporarily. I originally planned to come back before the party. In a hurry, Peter casually talked about a perfunctory panic, which made Mary Jane even more unhappy. I see. I'll change my clothes and go there. Mary sullened her face, cast aside the bewildered Peter, and left the windowsill to return to her room. Oops. Seeing Mary's figure leaving from the window, and Peter drooping his head, Ned, who couldn't hear their conversation, knew that Peter must have been counseled again, and he punched the wall angrily. What a great opportunity. Why did Peter let it go? As he said this, he ran towards Peter, who was shuffling back. You idiot. What a great opportunity just now. Why don't you take the opportunity to confess to Mary? Ned. Peter, who had been staring at the ground, raised his head and saw that his friend was staring at him badly, scratching his head inexplicably, and then reacted with hindsight. You have seen it all. Thinking of seeing him as embarrassed by a friend, Peter panicked, but soon he became lost again, because there was one thing that made him sadder than this. I seem to annoy Mary. How did you do it? Ned gasped, shocked Peter. Kraft, who slowly walked over by Ned, also admired Peter. He only realized that Mary had some good feelings for Peter, so he would tease him like this again and again. Logically speaking, Peter didn't even take the opportunity. Confession, then Mary wouldn't be angry. If she was angry just because of this situation, then Mary would have been pissed off by Peter. I don't know why. Peter grabbed his hair with an annoyed look, and told Ned his previous conversation with Mary. Ned. You just said that you wanted to inform Mary, and then I was cut off and used to make a prank. Kraft, who followed the two of them, was also convinced, and he rolled his eyes and spit out. Then Peter was taken aback. Kraft? When did you come? Shaking his head speechlessly, Kraft really had nothing to say to Peter, this idiot, and walked past him and Ned to Parker's house. Peter also understood that he had said something stupid, and he was silent for a while before remembering to settle accounts with Kraft. Wait. You kid cheated me again. Peter took 2 quick steps to catch up with Kraft, grabbed him by the shoulder and pulled him back. I'm obviously creating opportunities for you, but you are too unkind to seize the opportunity. Kraft broke free of Peter's palm, with a look of contempt. I don't need you to give me any chance, Peter insisted. Oh, Peter, forget it. If it weren't for Kraft, you wouldn't dare to talk to Mary at all. However, this good friend Ned also pierced the knife at this time. If you rely on yourself, you won't be able to chase Mary Jane in this life. Hey. Ned. It's no use yelling at me, admit it, Peter, you were a coward when you were in front of Mary. He doesn't always have the guts to go anywhere. Kraft pouted his lips mockingly. Oh no, I'm just not ready. Peter did not quarrel with Kraft leisurely at this time. If you continue to prepare, Mary will become someone else's girlfriend. I have heard that the guy Lightning has been showing great hospitality to Mary recently. After Ned said this, Peter became even more depressed, and he also heard about it, but considering the gap between himself and Lightning Thompson, Peter was totally unconfident that he could be a beauty. Hi, Peter, are you interested in going to the movies with me next weekend? Just when Peter became depressed because of Thompson, Mary Jane's voice suddenly rang in his ears, making him instantly refreshed. Interested. I am very interested. The ecstatic Peter looked back abruptly, but he didn't see Mary, except that Kraft, the bear kid, was holding a small horn and grinning at him. Then the movie ticket is up to you. I want to see the latest Ghost Street. Kraft continued to tease Peter with Mary's voice. And Ned was laughing to death from the side. Kraft. At this moment Peter finally knew what Kraft was using to imitate his own voice. What an interesting invention, I don't know the principle. As Peter chased Kraft, he thought in his heart that even with full of anger, Peter was still full of interest in Kraft's trumpet. Although Peter is a few years older than Kraft, Kraft adjusted his foot-strengthening shoes early. With Peter's weak physical strength, it is naturally impossible to catch him, and he is escaping back to Parker. After home, with the partiality of Aunt May and Uncle Ben, Peter has no way to take Kraft at all. Soon, Mary Jane, who had changed her clothes, also came to Parker's house. Fortunately, America was not very particular about giving gifts. Otherwise, Mary received the notice at this time, and there was no time to prepare the gifts. But even so, she didn't have a good face for Peter Parker, and she ignored Peter until the end of the party, seeing Aunt May and Uncle Ben have been shaking their heads helplessly. After the happy birthday party, Kraft's life was restored to peace again, and Martin Lee was not at home, so he could go to Fatty Lau's tooth sacrifice every day. Don't live a small life too comfortably. The only thing that annoys him a little, in terms of Dreamland technology, it is slightly stuck in a bottleneck. Because he dreamed that something was not controlled by Kraft, which caused him to have faults in many technical aspects. Even if he could study by himself when he was awake, he could not get a lot of related textbooks and materials. And many crafts now have something made by ability, either without equipment or materials, otherwise it is too dangerous. Just as Kraft wondered if he would take the opportunity to rest for a while, a new character appeared in his dream. This is Unscientific. Kraft woke up again from the bed, and then began to doubt life with his head. This time, the person who appeared in the dream was a Japanese again, and just like Dr. aka, the name was directly, Doctor. Judging from the technology she showed in the dream, she was also worthy of the name of Doctor. The problem is, what the hell is only 8 years old? Are Japanese elementary school students going against the sky? The former detective Shinichi Kudo, who was only well-known and never met, was already very exaggerated. The 8-year-old young Dr. Lowly Tone made an intelligent robot like humans alone, too unreal, right? Kraft, who had mastered a lot of science and technology by relying on his dreams, was still somewhat complacent, but after seeing Dr. Dongyun, the heaven-defying little Lowly, he was really shocked. I must be dreaming. No. I was dreaming. It turned out to be a dream, then it's okay. Kraft was so shocked that his thinking was already a little confused, and finally he deceived himself and lay back on the bed, pretending that nothing had happened. By the time he woke up again, Kraft had completely accepted the fact that he was not as good as an 8-year-old Lowly. Only then did he have the time to recall the bits and pieces of Dr. Dongyun's creation of the robot in his dream. Then he found out. With my technique, it seems I can do it. Kraft became excited all at once. A robot that is almost indistinguishable from humans in appearance and behavior can be made with such a bunch of relatively simple technologies. This Dr. Tomo must be like Dr. aka, and belong to some kind of unscientific scientist. If he can really replicate the same robot, it means that his dream is definitely not just about imparting knowledge. This kind of weird science can be replicated, so can the magic and immortality be far away? Kraft couldn't help but fell into a reverie. After making a call to Fatty Liao proficiently and asking him to ask for a leave of absence, Kraft took milk and bread from the refrigerator for breakfast, and then ran towards his studio. Pushing open the door of the studio, Kraft opened the lid of the milk and took 2 sips, swallowing the bread stuffed in his mouth on the road. Roar almost choked to death. Kraft punched his chest lightly with his fist, and poured another 2 mouthfuls of milk to suppress his shock. Throwing the empty milk box into the trash can, Kraft began to draw the robot's design. Although Kraft does not need to design drawings, he can copy the production process step by step according to the memory in the dream, but this will not have much effect on his own technical polishing. Anyway, he now has enough funds and time. Quite ample trial and error cost, it is natural to choose a method that can hone the technique more. Kraft does not intend to change the design of the initial version, although there are many designs in it that are a bit inexplicable to him, such as the toe USB, the brain bread machine, and the large size that the robot cannot remove by itself. Clockwork. But in order to be stable, Kraft tried not to modify it when he first tried to make it. Kraft, who was drawing the design, suddenly turned his head and looked back suspiciously. Then he stopped his work and called up the surveillance in the studio. However, in the surveillance studio, he was the only one in the studio from beginning to end. One person exists. Illusion. Kraft scratched his head and glanced vigilantly behind him. When he was drawing the design, he vaguely felt that someone behind him was peeping at him. Kraft's intuition was very sensitive, and he had a memory. From the beginning, this peculiar intuition has always existed in him, and he has saved himself several times when he was wandering in the past, so he still believes in his intuition very much. It's just that occasional intuitions are wrong. Especially when Kraft first finds that his intuition is very useful, he becomes nervous when he is a little disturbed, but later he finds that it is his own psychological effect. Kraft it also took a lot of time to adjust, so after checking the monitoring and still not finding any strangeness, he didn't care about it anymore. Kraft, who returned to work, quickly finished drawing the design, and then he actively blocked the memory of Dr. Dongyun when he made the robot. This operation is already familiar to him. This is also related to the characteristics of his dream memory. The dreams related to invention and creation, unlike ordinary memories, are like files that can be recalled at any time, a bit like the so-called memory palace, but they are only effective for Kraft's dream memory. After shielding the related memories, Kraft began to make robots according to the design drawings he drew. This was done in the studio for more than a week. Martin Li came back from a business trip, but Kraft still stayed in the studio and did not come out. Mingming Dongyun made the robot in less than a day. Kraft only shielded the production-related memories, and he still had impressions of the other details. I had already blocked it together. Kraft grabbed the hair that had become messy because it hadn't been taken care of for a long time, and lamented in his heart. Hey, Kraft, did you stay up again yesterday? Martin Li came in carrying a bag of steamed dumplings and frowned as he looked at Kraft's red eyes. No, Kraft hurriedly waved his hands. His production was nearing the end. It would be a shame if Martin was forcibly caught back at this time. I just used my eyes too much. If you don't believe me, you can check last night's surveillance. I went to bed after 11 o'clock. Really? But you promised me to go to bed before 10 o'clock. Martin said with a calm face, staring at Kraft. I'm too devoted to my work and forget it. Kraft leaned forward to Martin and smiled flatteringly. I ordered an alarm clock today and I will definitely go to bed before 10 o'clock. Anyway, it can be over today, let's just fool around. You said it. Martin didn't know the little abacus in Kraft's heart. He reached out his hand and clicked on Kraft's forehead twice, finally showing a smile on his face, and then passed the xiaolongbao in his hand. Hurry up and eat breakfast. Oh, xiaolongbao from David's house. When Kraft was about to reach out to pick it up, Martin suddenly retracted his hand. You haven't washed yet. All right. Kraft's hands froze in midair, then helplessly lowered his arms, and moved his head back to the bathroom one step at a time. After eating the breakfast that Martin brought, Kraft moved his hands and feet, and once again invested in the production of the robot. The whole of the at-the-moment robot has been basically completed, and it is almost a detail supplement in the final power source is connected. The so-called power source is not the huge amounts of clockwork on the back, but a device that uses food to transform energy. The device is placed on the abdomen of the robot in the design drawing. In short, it is really given by Dr. Dongyun. The robot has designed a stomach, relying on food intake to convert into motivation. It's so unscientific. After returning from a business trip, Martin Li, whose work became more leisurely, did not rush to leave, but watched with interest as Kraft assembled the robot girl that was about to be completed a little bit. The child has grown up. Seeing the cute face of the robot girl in front of him, Martin lifted his chin and cast a meaningful look at Kraft. Kraft. Hey, Martin. Why are you looking at me with that strange look? Kraft, who was staring uncomfortably, couldn't help protesting. No, nothing. Martin Li retracted his gaze, and then said to him earnestly, although this robot looks cute, it is not a real human being after all. I definitely know this kind of thing, I did it myself. Kraft rolled his eyes at Martin inexplicably. Oh, well, I might have misunderstood. Martin slapped his lips, and Kraft's reaction made him realize that he might have something wrong. God babbling. Kraft curled his lips and didn't delve into what his adoptive father had misunderstood. The production of the robot had reached the final stage, and at this time he had no intention of paying attention to other things. Putting the last energy device on the robot, Kraft closed the lid on his abdomen, tore off and smoothed the rolled-up clothes, and Kraft excitedly activated the last switch. Caw. Caw caw caw. As the clockwork behind her turned, the robot girl slowly opened her eyes. Kraft? The robot girl tilted her head, and based on the data in her head, she called out the name of the boy in front of her. Ha ha ha. I made it. Kraft hugged Martin beside him excitedly, then shook his head frantically. Yes. It's me. Kraft rushed to the robot girl and lowered his hands against her. It's really incredible. Wait. The robot girl shyly guarded her body and cried in a soft voice. H is bad behavior. You big head. Kraft slapped the robot girl on the forehead with his hand. You are a robot. What's so good about you? Ah. The robot girl let out a lovely cry, squatted down while clutching her forehead, and with tears in her eyes, she complained of Kraft's atrocities. Martin Li looked stupidly at the interaction between his adopted son and the robot he had built, and his heart was in a mess. This TMD is a robot. The robot made by Kraft has surpassed Martin's expectations. He thought that Kraft was at best making a robot that looks like a human, but in fact it is a large toy robot, but now he sees the robot girl in front of him. Rich expressions and intelligence when communicating. Remove the clockwork on your back and it's no different from ordinary humans, okay. After interacting with the robot enthusiastically for a while, Kraft turned his head to look at the calm surface and the stormy Martin Lee in his heart. Martin, can you help Alice get a proof of identity? Alice? Martin recovered and looked at Kraft. Well, the name I gave her. Kraft pointed to the robot girl he made, and told Martin about the settings he had already thought of. Alice Lee, Chinese name Li Mingnai, your distant niece, my cousin. There is no need to give Naono an identity of Japanese descent, just keep a name. As for Alice, it is derived from the meaning of Alice in Wonderland, which has something to do with Dreamland. But, she is obviously older than you. The seniority is up, seniority. Kraft waved his hand with an uncomfortable face, who made Ming Nai in the dream look like a high school student, but he definitely couldn't call her his sister. Alright. Martin smacked his lips. Kraft did it himself anyway, and let him shout whatever he wanted, but. Martin pointed to the clockwork on Alice's back. With this thing, other people will doubt Alice's identity? Can't it be removed? Sure. Kraft tore off the clockwork from Alice's back. This is just an ornament. Huh? Huh. Alice Lee looked at the clockwork in Kraft's hand with a shocked face, and asked her soul. Then why do you want to install this for me? Kraft pondered for a moment, and then responded with Dr. Dongyun's original words, because this is more cute. As Kraft spoke, he slipped the clockwork back easily. Tickets. The spring inserted playfully turned a small half-turn. Alice Nano Lee. It's not cute like this. Kraft. I suddenly understood the reason why Dr. Dongyun designed the clockwork. Kraft molested Alice enthusiastically for a while, and finally it was Martin Lee, who had a black line in his forehead, and asked him to take down the insignificant clockwork. Aren't you going to be her brother? That's how you should be? Martin gave Kraft a thud, and grinned irritably. Okay. I see. Kraft rubbed his head, muttering to remove the clockwork behind Alice again. Too good. Alice wept with joy and hugged Martin Lee. Thank you, Uncle Martin. After that, things were very simple. With Martin's current power, it was too easy to get Alice's identity certificate. But Kraft didn't arrange Alice to go to school immediately. One thing is that he wants to observe for a while. Although Kraft has already input most of the common sense to Alice long ago, it makes her look no different from ordinary people, but her essence is still a robot after all, so she still observes more. A while is better. In fact, if it weren't for the trouble, Kraft didn't think there would be any problems with Alice's identity being revealed. The second reason is naturally due to age issues. Although Alice's external age is older than herself, although she is considered to be a big brother in generations, it's a fact that Alice's external age is older than herself. Although she can rebuild her body, Kraft thinks it doesn't make much sense. It's better to wait 2 years for his own age to go up, and then go to the 9th grade with Alice. That's fine. Martin Lee said to Kraft, tasting the meal cooked by Alice. I'm often away from home. I can rest assured that Alice will take care of you. With that, Martin glanced at the robot girl who was eating with relish, and felt speechless for a while. A good robot actually has to eat. I really don't understand what the young people are thinking. But the craftsmanship is really good. Martin let out a laugh, shook his head and continued to taste the food on the table. Alice's good craftsmanship is a must. Kraft urges Martin Lee to get married every day. Doesn't he just want a breeder who can cook Chinese food? So when inputting information for Alice, he also stuffed a bunch of recipes in extra. Next time, ask Fatty Liao to see if you can get some recipes for Fumanlu's signature dishes from him. Kraft was picking up the meal quickly, planning unsatisfiedly in his heart. After eating a hearty lunch, Martin Lee looked at Alice, who was doing housework consciously, and felt quite settled. Regardless of the strange grooves on this robot, at least it is very practical in terms of practicality, and he can safely throw Kraft at home and devote himself to the plan of revenge against the Magia gang. I still have a job, so I'll leave first. Martin Lee patted Kraft on the head and reminded him. If you have time, prepare yourself some more hole cards. Recently, I have a bit of a business conflict with others, and they may come to you for trouble. Coming again. Kraft frowned. This was not the first time this happened. Otherwise, why would he give himself some weird equipment such as anesthesia watches, because he had similar experiences before. But that was relatively early. After Martin established the asylum, this situation did not happen again. Aren't you all a millionaire now? Why would anyone come to trouble you? Because I am more powerful now, this kind of thing will be more. But the previous opponents are not strong. I have not found you before. I have been solved by my men. But this time the opponent is different. Martin Lee rubbed Kraft's head, squatted down and said with a serious expression, I need to mobilize a lot of people to deal with them, so you might be negligent here. Is there a problem? Having lived with Kraft for so long, Martin Lee still knows him well. His adopted son is not as gentle as he looks on the outside, so he did not treat Kraft as an ordinary child. No problem at all. Kraft patted his chest confidently and replied. Don't worry, I have so many methods. For example, when did you learn Kung Fu? Martin raised his eyebrows, jokingly. Hey. Kraft stroked the back of his head embarrassedly. After that ball, Martin asked curiously what was going on with Kraft. Naturally, he wouldn't have anything to hide. He took out the arm-strength wristband he made to Martin and showed it to Martin. Martin also did a set, but was rejected. You are not the only one with hole cards. At the time, Martin patted Kraft on the shoulder meaningfully and said. After confessing to Kraft, Martin Lee left the house. What he said to Kraft was true and false. The Magia gang's revenge was expected by Martin, but to say that he has no staff to ensure Kraft's safety is a lie. But Martin wants to see how far his adopted son can do it. By the way, dig a pit for Magia who came to steal the house. Is something dangerous going to happen? Alice listened to the general idea, and when Martin left, she cautiously leaned in and asked in a low voice. It's not a big problem for peace of mind. Kraft did not pay much attention to Martin Lee's reminder. He was still very confident in his inventions. Besides, after being calm for so long, Kraft was not as vigilant as before. It was a lot of slack back then. But I still have to strengthen your arms. Although he is not too concerned about Martin's so-called business opponents, Kraft is a drip-proof guy. In other words, he hopes he can become a drip-proof wise man, so he will not forget the precautions he should have. After all, apart from a pair of rocket-flying punches that have more stereotypes than practicality, Alice's attack method is only the soybean machine gun on the wrist that is used to make fun. Huh? Me? Do I want to fight too? Alice waved her hands in a panic. I can't do it, fighting or something, it's terrible. It's also strange. Obviously Kraft adjusted her personality a bit when inputting information for Alice, and in the end she was still as soft and cute as in the dream. Kraft can't help this. Artificial intelligence is still too advanced for him. He dare not move too much. Don't worry. Just strengthen your self-protection ability, just in case. Reassuring Alice softly, Kraft stood up and stretched. I'll take a nap and go to the studio in the afternoon to help you upgrade. Ha. Then I'll take a nap. Did my brother prepare a room for me? Alice yawned too, wiped the tears from the corner of her eyes and asked. Kraft. What does Dr. Dongyun think? The robot has a nap. There is also the physiological reaction of yawning and tearing. How exactly did it do it? Although Alice assembled it by herself from beginning to end, Kraft felt that even if he had mastered all the robot-related knowledge of the world, he could not understand the mystery of some of the unscientific functions. Come with me. Shaking his head to throw away these messy thoughts, Kraft took Alice to an unused room and took out an air mattress and pillow quilt from the cabinet. You will do it for a while, help you upgrade in the afternoon, and then take you to buy some daily necessities. Hi. Even if Kraft set Alice to be of Chinese descent, she still has some habits and oral addictions that Japanese people have, but this is not a big problem, so Kraft didn't care too much. It's not as cute as this. After helping Alice to clean up the room briefly, Kraft went back to his room and fell asleep. From time to time in the dream, he can acquire all kinds of knowledge, so Kraft has developed a good habit of taking a nap, but it also has a bad effect, that is, when he wakes up in the morning, he is also used to sleep back. Otherwise Kraft will also I won't get myself a screaming alarm device. As Kraft entered his dreamland, a middle-aged man in a white coat with sparse hair on his head appeared in his dream. Good luck these days. Looking at the standard white coat, Kraft's eyes lit up. With this costume, it basically showed that this dream was a scientific way, and that the middle-aged man in front of him was still a new face that he had never seen before. This gave Kraft a lot of anticipation in his heart. Brother, it's time to get up. Alice, who was awakened by the alarm clock, got up from the bed and knocked on the door of Kraft's room gently. Come in. Kraft's voice came from inside, and it didn't sound like he was in a good mood. Alice pushed open the door and stuffed her head through the crack in the door. I saw Kraft sitting on his bed with a black face and an angry look. Did I quarrel you? After being touched by Kraft's salted pig hand, before, Alice was still very afraid of him, she asked carefully, for fear that Kraft would sprinkle the air of getting up on her. Nothing dealing with you. Seeing Alice's hamster-like expression, Kraft rubbed his cheek vigorously to make his expression not so ugly, and soothed softly. Turning off the bed while pinching the bridge of his nose, Kraft calmed down his anger while leading Alice to his studio. What the hell is a solar flashlight? And that shit will kill you 3000. Can this TM also be called an invention? He was in a white lab coat and bald, looking at the appearance of a tech-savvy guy. Did he actually go the same way as a handmade Jang? Wrong. The invention of this product is not as good as manual. I'm furious. You have a face called Da Vinci. The plan begins. Martin Lee, who left home, pressed the Bluetooth headset in his ear, and gave orders to the demon who had been prepared. Understood, boss. The deep and hoarse voice was transmitted back to Martin's earphones through the radio waves, and the demon's gang hidden in New York's Chinatown took action and flocked to the largest gangster gathering place in New York, Hell's Kitchen. Soon, Martin Lee's cell phone began to ring frantically. What do you want to do? Negatives. A muffled questioning sound came from the phone. It's just a personal grievance, Jin Bin, you know. Martin Lee's appearance changed at no time. The whole person appeared black and white like a film negative, and his voice became as low and hoarse as the demon gang. Just trouble with the hammer? Just trouble him. If you do something extra, you should know the consequences, the negatives. Don't worry, Jin Bin. I have no plans to be an enemy of the entire New York gang. So much the better. After trying a few words with each other, he hung up the phone, and then ordered to his men next to him, pay attention to all the movements of the demon gang. As long as they don't provoke our territory, they don't do anything. Except for Jin Bin, the big and small gangs in Hell's Kitchen were all agitated because of the actions of the demon gang. Those gangs who knew the inside story and were able to contact Martin Lee were relatively calm, but more unknowing little gangs gathered in their own territory in fear, guarding against the invasion of the demon gang. However, the invasion of the devil gang did not wait, but many gangsters took advantage of the chaos and began to wantonly annex their counterparts around their territory. The superhero, Daredevil, Punisher, etc. who were active in Hell's Kitchen became nervous because of this, but after learning that it was a gang fire, most of the superhero chose to stand on the sidelines. Without the intervention of a third party, the members of the demon gang drove straight forward and successfully invaded the territory of the Magia gang. As the old opponents of the demon gang, the Magia gang has always been following the movements of the demon gang, so they were not caught off guard, but had waited in their own territory early on. Although the boss of the Magia gang, Hammerhead, Joseph Harrow, has not yet figured out why the demon gang has been targeting himself. Martin Lee, who became Mr. Negatives, was personally strong, and the demon gang was slightly better than the Magia gang, but when the two parties exchanged fire, they fell into a stalemate. The Magia gang has a bit of advantage to fight at home, but more importantly, the Devil gang is a mainly Chinese gang, and its territory is in Chinatown. It is impossible to connect with the horses in the Hell's Kitchen in terms of contacts. Compared with the Jia gang, after sensing the movement of the demon gang, the Hammerhead quickly contacted his allies in the Hell's Kitchen, so that it was able to support it under the demon gang's full offensive. Humph. A bunch of trash. Although the negatives didn't think they could take Magia away in this way, their resistance was beyond their expectations. The negatives snorted and used negative energy to create a demon mask. He got his own face, intending to join the battle personally. Martin's true identity is not a secret thing in the underground world of New York. It's just that he is a philanthropist who has won the Medal of Freedom. In addition to the concern of craft, he usually uses Mr. Film when his identity is active. He will wear a heart demon mask to conceal his identity. This is also the reason why Hammerhead hasn't figured out when he offended the demon gang until now. With the addition of Mr. Negative Film, the demon gang's offensive suddenly became destructive. Under the guidance of Negative Film, the demon gang successfully took off 3 important sites of the Magia gang within an hour. Now the big boss Hammer could not sit still, and hurriedly went to intercept with his own manpower. Negatives. As a mousy, Hammer lifted the Chicago typewriter in his hand and gave him a shuttle as soon as he saw the film. However, the negative just raised his arm randomly, creating a negative energy shield in front of him, and easily blocked the bullet. Go to hell. I didn't feel that I needed to talk to the Hammer. With a big wave of the negative, the members of the demon gang continued to attack the Magian gang, while he carried a negative energy sword and rushed towards the Hammer. Compared with Martin Lee, Joseph Harrow does not have any special abilities. He just suffered a severe head injury in a gang fire, and then replaced himself with an iron skull, which prevented him from being shot again. Give a headshot, and after some training, he can easily use his iron head to knock over cars and crash walls. This is also the origin of his nickname, Hammerhead. But in the face of the negative energy of Mr. Negative, the iron head of Hammerhead, which is invincible in ordinary gang battles, is not worth mentioning. In just a few minutes, the Hammer's head was chopped to pieces by the negatives, and the scarred head was cut open again, revealing the skull with metallic luster inside. However, although Hammer had never seen the power of negatives as an enemy, he still collected some information about negatives. He knew that he was a character with special ability, and this kind of character is not rare in Hell's Kitchen. Boom. A figure of huge amounts of broke through the wall and rushed out of the building next to it, hitting a shoulder on the film that was caught off guard, and then pushed him all the way forward, collapsing several walls one after another, before the negative energy film was exploded. The husband flew out. Ahem. Damn. The film struggling to stand up from the pile of rubble, his left hand was weakly beaten beside him, he gently stroked some of his left ribs, and he felt a tingling pain. Obviously, the injury was not light. Although the negative energy obtained after the human body experiment gave Martin Lee Superman-like power, this power is more inclined to stimulate the mental and energy attacks of others, which can improve one's physical fitness, but it also not much. Alexei. The negative stared at the attacker just now, squeezing his name out of his teeth. Like Joseph Haro, Alexei Mikhailovich Sisevich is also a rascal, but he is different from the Hammer that lays down a large area. He has always been a thug with a simple mind. His identity was mixed in the Hell's Kitchen, and later he was pitted for human experimentation, and was forcibly put on a layer of rhino leather, and thus obtained almost indestructible ability and far superior physical quality. Rhinoceros Alexei got up from the ground, shook his dizzy head, sprayed a rough air from his nostrils, and stared back at the film. Alexei's intelligence is not high, but his fighting power is one of the best in Hell's Kitchen. He came to help Hammer not to be a hometownship, it was purely paid by others. And if someone else pays him, then he has to work hard. Alexei's brain circuit is that simple. What? Alexei lowered his head and pointed the rhino horns on his head at the film. He screamed and exerted force at the same time. It really hit him like an angry rhino. Tisk. Trouble. The negatives created several negative energy spears and threw them at Alexei. At the same time, the negative energy on the soles of his feet exploded, slinging his body to one side. The pitch-black spear slammed into Alexei's body, causing him to utter a pain roar, but it couldn't cause much damage to his body. Instead, he was knocked down by Alexei Chichi. The negatives that had returned to his subordinates narrowed his eyes and looked around. The Hammerhead at the moment was nowhere to be found, leaving only a group of subordinates and Alexei to intercept him here. Let's go. He pursed his mouth, but the film still reluctantly gave an order to evacuate. In addition to creating swords and energy attacks, Mr. Film's negative energy is actually the most powerful ability of negative energy infestation. To put it bluntly, it magnifies the negative emotions in others' hearts. It is natural to deal with ordinary people or those who have experienced special grief. It's always bad, but if you deal with the villains in Hell's Kitchen, the effect is not so obvious. If he had not been attacked, he would still be able to entangle with Alexei, but now his body injury is not light, unable to stop this arrogant rhino man. The demon gang has no outstanding personal combat power except him. The existence of continue to fight will only be upset by Alexei. I still underestimated Hell's Kitchen. The negatives left the Hell's Kitchen surrounded by members of the demon gang, and looked back at the Magia gang's resident reluctantly. As one of the biggest gangsters in New York, it's definitely impossible not to pay attention to the special place of Hell's Kitchen, but his sphere of influence is in Chinatown after all. Even if he knows that there are Jin Bin, Alexei, Daredevil, etc. These special characters exist, but there is no specific contact. Most of the intersection with the Hell's Kitchen is to retaliate against the Magian gang. That's why Alexei was caught off guard. Just as the negatives don't know about Hell's Kitchen didn't know much about Mr. Film's strength before, so this time he didn't finish his work. After that, it will be more difficult to force the Hammer out again, even if it is forced out. Hammer, then he must be fully prepared. However, if you want to destroy the Magia gang, you are not the only option to kill the Hammerhead. As long as you continue to destroy the Magia gang's business and industry, the hungry wolves in the Hell's Kitchen will naturally fall into trouble and swarm the Admiral Magia gang. Divide and eat. Even if this will hurt the enemy by 1000 and self-damage by 800, Mr. Negative will not hesitate to take revenge, but as an outsider, the Demon Gang can launch a large-scale raid on the Magia gang, but if it becomes a long-term one, confrontation, Jin Ping will not agree to the big guys in Hell's Kitchen. With the example of Alexei, the negatives will not underestimate these people. Notify others to retreat. The film was holding his ribs, unwilling to give orders. Craftina sent a few more people to ensure his safety. Uncle Martin isn't coming back. Alice put the hot meal on the table and asked Kraft, who had just answered the phone. Yeah. Probably because he thinks you can take care of me. Kraft sat down at the table angrily and muttered. He must have long thought I was troublesome to drag the oil bottle, and now it's not good to be chic in the nightclub. Huh. Nightclub. Hearing such a stimulating word, Alice's face quickly turned red, and her hands began to shake. You are a robot. What's so shy about you? Kraft glanced at Alice silently, and then saw the crumbling soup bowl in her hand. The soup is going to be spilled. Reaching out in time to hold the soup bowl in Alice's hand, Kraft grinned and placed it firmly on the table. Hot. After putting down the soup bowl, Kraft screamed and threw his hands up. He was not separated by a rag like Alice. You are a robot. Why are you afraid of getting hot? Although Alice made it herself, Kraft still couldn't understand her operating mechanism. Yes, I'm sorry. Alice dropped the rag in her hand and hurried to get the medical kit. Ah. Kraft sighed helplessly while compressing his hands with the rag that Alice had dropped. He was about to get used to Alice's reckless situation. Although it was a headache, it really made Kraft feel like a younger sister. It's actually quite warm. Brother. The medicine box is here, oh. Watching Alice fall to the ground and slapped her in front of her with a crack. The medicine chest she was holding scattered all over the floor, Kraft sighed again. I must have just pumped my head to feel warm. Woohoo. Alice rubbed her nose and raised her head, looking at Kraft with tears in her eyes. Martin actually thinks you can take care of me. Kraft, who sighed 3 times, pulled Alice up, and then sorted out the overturned medicine cabinet with her. Ah. Alice groaned and retorted unwillingly. But without me, no one will cook for you. Yes, that's right. Kraft reached out amusedly and touched Alice's head, then he grinned again when he touched the burned area. We Alice are the most important. Don't treat me like a kid. Alice protested fiercely, waving her fist. Although Martin Lee, an irresponsible parent, does not have a home every day, Kraft's life is still full of fun. This made him completely forget Martin's warning before. At the very beginning, Kraft warned him whether there were any strangers around him, but after more than 10 days passed and there was no movement at all, Kraft left the matter behind. Boom. The sudden impact interrupted the fight between the brothers and sisters. The fragments of the window mixed with broken glass made a mess of the food on the dining table with the chopsticks not moving. Kraft turned his neck stiffly and looked at the damaged window of his home. A few sluggish gangsters were turning in from there. Yo. There is actually a little girl. One of the guys who had put a row of lip rings on his lips looked around the room, and then looked at Alice with a silver smile. Don't worry about it. The strongest of the intruders slapped the man with the lip ring on the back of his head, and shouted in a low voice. Hurry up and complete the boss's mission. It will be in trouble when the police arrive. What did you do to someone else's dinner, bastards? Kraft in rage adjusted the knob on his wrist to the maximum, then grabbed a medicine bottle beside him and threw it at the group of gangsters. The Hammerhead's men just showed a disdainful smile. They heard a stern roar howl. The medicine bottle thrown by the target person came to them in a blink of an eye, and hit the lip ring with huge amounts of force. On the man's nose. The man with the lip ring couldn't even make a scream. He was smashed and fainted, and the small medicine bottle flew out from the gap in the window with his body. Damn it. The target is not ordinary people. The strong man in the lead drew a pistol from behind, and the other invaders also took out weapons one after another. Switchblade, steel pipe, iron chain and the like are quite in line with their gangster identity. If you don't want to get hurt, just give me good. Huh? The leading brawny raised his pistol and pointed it at Kraft. He was about to say something cruel when he saw Kraft laying his left hand flat and facing him with his watch. Before the brawny had time to wonder, I felt something pierced my forehead, and then a drowsy rush came crazy. Huh. Hum. While the eyelids fell rapidly, the strong man couldn't hold the gun in his hand and fell to the ground, and then his whole figure fell to the ground as if he was exhausted. Alice. F*K them to death. Kraft snapped the watch cover and shouted at Alice. Huh. Huh? Alice, who was in a daze from start to finish, finally recovered from Kraft's reminder and raised her hands to point at the panicked intruder. Fire. Rocket flying fist. Hey. Along with Alice's sweet drink, a puff of white smoke erupted from her wrist, and she fired a pair of fists out, hitting the bridges of the 2 gangsters' noses, and also exposed the cannon barrels on her wrists. Da 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 da. After Kraft's modification, Alice's wrist cannons will naturally no longer be beans, but anesthetic bombs filled with Dr. Aha's special anesthetic. Soon, the gangsters pierced with anesthesia bombs lay on the ground. A bunch of bastards. It's lawless. Is this really Hell's Kitchen? Kraft, whose dinner was ruined, gave the stunned intruders a violent kick, then took out his mobile phone from his pocket and prepared to call the police. No need to call the police, Master Kraft. The sudden sound outside the window stopped his movements. Kraft followed the reputation. A Chinese man in a black suit appeared there at some unknown time. Behind him, there were people wearing the same clothes as him who were putting the lips around. The man towed away. A bit familiar. Kraft frowned and looked at the sudden appearance of the Chinese. Huh. Are you not the security guard of Martin's antique shop? Kraft once met him in search of a suitable cauldron when making witch potions. Master Kraft has a good memory. The security guard showed a blunt smile, and then said to him, "We just leave the finishing work to us." As he said, he rushed to the side and shook his head. A group of Asians in black suits filed in and carried all the intruders out of the room. When they left, they cleared away the debris in the house. Then, let's say goodbye first, and there will be workers coming to repair the windows tomorrow. The security guard who hadn't mentioned his name from start to finish nodded to Clough, and then walked away with a group of black suits without looking back. Hateful. Martin calculated it. Now, what Kraft doesn't understand, any shortage of manpower is bullshit. Martin just wants to see what hole cards he has. Although a little upset, it's not worth getting angry, but Kraft is a little curious. What is Martin doing? Why doesn't it feel like you are doing serious business? If it's just an ordinary business competition, is it necessary to use a gun? The behavior style of the group of people just now is not like some corporate thugs, but more like the style of the gangsters in Hell's Kitchen. Elder brother. Picking up her hands and putting them back, Alice leaned in front of Kraft and gingerly touched his sleeve. What? Kraft, who was meditating, came back to his senses, smiled and patted Alice on the shoulder. Good job. Hey, Alice, who was praised by Kraft, touched the back of her head shyly, showing a silly smile. The two simply cleaned up the messed up table, cooked 2 bowls of instant noodles, and dealt with the dinner. Go. Kraft patted his full belly and waved at Alice, let's go to the studio. Although it was easy to solve the group of people just now, judging from their performance, it is not as simple as a commercial competitor, and when Martin this guy should be cruel, he won't be polite with himself. The ghost knows that there will be a second or even a third or fourth attack, so Kraft felt that he should be more prepared. Compared to his own residence, Kraft felt that his studio was more secure. Before the matter is resolved, we will live in the studio. Pack a bunch of food and daily necessities, Kraft said to Alice. As for the school, Kraft, I don't plan to go to the school for the time being. This is all in order not to harm the innocent. It is definitely not that Kraft wants to play truant. After living in the studio, in addition to adding defensive measures to the studio, Kraft kept sleeping. Unfortunately, although he dreamed of a lot of magical props, most of them were not used. They needed either mysterious powers or special ones. Material. From time to time, he would run a character similar to Da Vinci to come out funny, making Kraft so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. Kraft. Are you dead? While Kraft was busy making self-defense props for himself, Fatty Liao suddenly ran over and kicked the door of the studio open. Had Kraft not given the green light to the image of Fatty Liao in the surveillance system, and automatically turned off the defense system when he came over, he would have been a fat man by then. Seeing Kraft not speaking, just looking at him with a disgusting expression, Fatty Liao was immediately unhappy. You bastard. I am so worried about you at a loss. What's your face? Fatty Liao rushed forward, grabbed Kraft by the collar, and shook it vigorously. It's okay. Kraft broke free from Fat Liao, straightened his collar and said helplessly, didn't I say that? I have something to be busy with, don't come over easily if you have nothing to do. I'm not afraid that you will die in the studio and no one will know. Fatty Liao kicked Kraft lightly. He usually stayed in the studio and ordered some takeaways at his own house. This time, there was no movement at all. He thought it was Kraft's. There was a problem with the experiment, and I played myself in the laboratory. Don't worry, David, it's just that there is something on Martin's side. I'm worried that you will be implicated, so I told you not to come over. Kraft knew that Fatty Liao was kind, so he could only explain it briefly. Uncle Lee's business has a problem. Fatty Liao couldn't help with this kind of thing, so he quickly changed the subject. Then what do you usually do when you eat? Isn't it the instant noodles that you always eat? Fatty Liao hadn't waited for Kraft to respond when he saw that the door in the studio was opened, and a cute girl who grew up to his aesthetic standards from head to toe came out from inside. Brother, you can eat now. Damn it. When did you guy have such a cute sister? Fatty Liao grabbed Kraft by the collar again, then quickly released his hand and gave him a hug with his backhand. Uncle. You will be my real uncle from today. Kraft sighed. Give up, you have no future. Give up, you have no future. Kraft's words sounded like a bolt from the blue, blowing into Fat Lao's ears. Why? Fatty Lao's saliva flew wildly, pointing to Kraft's nose and jumping up and down. Could it be that you, a guy with big eyebrows and big eyes, still have a bad heart for his sister? What nonsense are you talking about? With a dark face, Kraft pushed Fatty Lao's head away. When he was about to explain to him, a group of people rushed in with weapons in their hands. Damn. Fatty, you are not here at the right time. Under the cover of Fatty Lao's body, Kraft quickly turned on the switch of his two-handed wristbands and then pulled him behind him. You hapless fellow, you came across looking for trouble as soon as you came. No, we just followed this kid in specially. The leader combed his head with a big back and explained slowly, as if he was holding the winning ticket. This time the intruder appeared to be more stylish. Not only did he not have as many bits and pieces as the punks, but he also unified his uniform. The black suit of One Water was obviously a pot that the Godfather had seen too much. So, those stray dogs and vagrants from a while ago were your ghosts? Not long after they moved into the studio, they once broke into a stray dog, and then they were stunned by Kraft's initial defense system. After that, several more appeared one after another, and finally one came. The tramps, after being stunned by the studio's defense system, were thrown back into the street by Alice. He didn't care too much at the time. Thinking about it now, there has been no attacker for such a long time. Obviously, it is not normal. It turned out to be pre-tested. Kraft pursed his mouth. This kind of brainy guy is much more difficult to deal with than the previous group of gangsters. Fortunately, it is now at my home court. As expected to be the genius boy whom Stark saw, Deshu patted his palms lightly. After all, the people sent before have failed. It's always good to be careful. Kraft, did I trouble you? Fatty Liao spoke weakly. Well, Kraft snorted as an answer, and then comforted, but it's not a big problem. Oh. Do you have any other means? The big back curled his mouth, thinking that Kraft was just bluffing. Is it the SoCal King Fu? But we are not defenseless rugby players. The big back showed the Beretta M92F in his hand, and revealed a little bit that he was not ignorant of Kraft. The group of black suits behind him is also a relaxed look. That's right, they are more than a dozen adults with guns. Are they not able to catch the three unarmed little ghosts? Brother, what should we do? Alice walked to Kraft in small steps and asked in a low voice that although Kraft had added a lot of equipment to her, she still looked like weeping. So is the character I adjusted for you just useless at all? Kraft stared at Alice like a frightened hamster. Don't worry. I will protect you. The obsessed Fatty Liao ignored the gunmen who surrounded them, and patted his chest to offer Alice courteously. Alice looked at Kraft at a loss, then at Fatty Liao, and then gave him a polite but awkward smile. Alice, hello, ready to fight? Kraft dragged Fatty Liao back behind Alice and shouted loudly. The battle begins. The battle begins. A green ball-shaped ornament on Kraft's desk suddenly opened its two round wings and made a mechanical synthesis sound. With the sound of harrow, a steel wall rose up around the studio, shutting everyone inside, and then a few openings were opened at the top of the wall, and more than a dozen machine guns protruded from it, all aimed at them. The group of people with big backs. Defense mode. Alice, who stood in front of Kraft and Fat Liao, also snorted. Her back suddenly opened, and several steel plates and bulletproof glass quickly formed a huge amounts of explosion-proof shield in front of her, protecting the three of them. After removing the useless spring for Alice, the device used to turn the spring on her back is naturally useless. Kraft removed it and made a lot of space, just as he was out of the dream. A bearded man named Laurie Swan learned a lot of quick assembly techniques and used it on Alice. In fact, most of the raised steel walls and machine guns were also made by Swan's technology, but Kraft gave control to Harrow, the artificial intelligence. The situation turned so fast that Fatty Liao couldn't even speak clearly in surprise. I said you have no future. Kraft shrugged at him and said helplessly. Is it time to talk about this? Abilities. Fatty Liao was so excited that he grabbed Kraft's shoulder and shook it vigorously. You have mastered such a terrible black technology silently. Although seeing Fatty Lau's surprised look gave Kraft a sense of accomplishment, it was not the time to be seduced. He broke away from Fatty Lau's hands and looked at his sweaty big back. Now you know my methods. Ha ha ha. I think there may be a slight misunderstanding between us. The big back quickly put Beretta in his hand, took out a white handkerchief and wiped the cold sweat on his forehead, and then roared loudly to the men behind him in Italian. What are you doing? Quickly. Put away the weapons for me. It turns out to be the Italian mafia. No wonder it's the same as the Corleone family. Kraft curled his lips, but it was a pity that he was completely exposed as soon as he fell, and he couldn't expect anything from this group of gangsters. I'm really sorry for disturbing you, but we also take money to do things. If we know that Mr. Kraft has such strength, we will not wade into this muddy water for anything. After wiping off the sweat, the big back head has somewhat recovered his previous demeanor, but the situation is better than others now, and he has placed himself in a low position very carefully. So, who is the person who really wants to trouble Martin? Why do you want to target him so? Kraft asked curiously. Martin refused to disclose to him, then he would not take the initiative to ask, but it did not prevent him from learning the situation from other people. We usually do things with money, and employers basically don't pay attention to things. The big back spread his hands helplessly, but he quickly added, but I know the person we handed over, it's Ma. Black Wolf, the capable cadre of the Gia gang. I heard that the business of the Magia gang has been very targeted recently. Maybe it has something to do with your father. Magia gang. Kraft froze for a moment, then a big smile appeared on his face. Then I know what's going on. Thank you for your doubts. After nodding to the big back to thank, Kraft patted his palms and ordered the little green ball on the table. Hello, change the anesthesia bomb. Anesthesia bomb preparation. Anesthesia bomb preparation. Harrow flapped his wings and made waves of electronic sounds, and the machine gun on the wall also made a sound of switching magazines. The big back was relieved. He straightened his collar and smiled bitterly at Kraft. The Gambino family will remember your friendship. Then he fell asleep with the men behind him. The battle is over. The battle is over. Under the order of Harrow electronic sound, the machine guns on the walls retracted one after another, and the steel walls sank to the ground. Brother, these gangsters are terrible. Alice retracted the explosion-proof shield and wailed to Clough with tears in her eyes. Aren't they killed all at once? Kraft rolled his eyes and tapped Alice lightly. But it's still scary. Alice grumbled and replied, which made Kraft completely abandon her plan to use her as a combat unit. Boom. The door of the studio was pushed open again, and the security guard also rushed in with a group of black suits last time. Come again. Fatty Liao jumped a step back when he was frightened, and then quickly recovered his calm expression and patted Kraft on the shoulder. Quick. Kraft. Get them done. After speaking, he took the initiative to shrink behind Alice. Didn't you say you want to protect Alice? Kraft glanced at him contemptuously, and then explained. Don't worry, these are his own people. The security chief nodded to Clough, waved to his opponent. A group of black suits quickly lifted another group of black suits, and then left without saying a word. Wait. Bring me a message for Martin so that he can come back when he is free. Kraft stopped the unknown security guard, and Martin went to the Magia gang to get revenge without telling himself. He could no longer pretend to be ignorant. Kraft. You can make such a powerful thing. After the black suits were gone, Fatty Liao resumed his former liveliness. He picked up the small green ball on the table and looked up and down, and exclaimed nonstop. Thank you for the compliment. Thank you for the compliment. Hello happily flapped his wings and said to Fatty Liao. Huh. What's this? Kraft whispered, his vision is much higher than Fat Liao. Hello. This intelligent robot is just a gadget. Those huge amounts of humanoid mechas in the dream are the romance of men. It's a pity that he can't make it now. Oh, you can move freely. When Fatty Liao watched his arms and legs grow, Harrow running around on the table was surprised roar again. Kraft patted the back of his head with a black line on his face. Are you stupid? I have made a simulation robot as big as Alice, so what's the point of Harrow? Oh right. Alice is actually a robot. I'm broken in love again. Fatty Liao, who had been decadent for 2 seconds, suddenly jumped to Kraft's side and hugged his shoulders tightly. Kraft. We are good friends, right? Right. Kraft replied with a little hesitation, mainly because Fatty Liao's eyes were really scary. Please make me a cute girl robot. Fatty Liao's eyes burst into green light. Having a robot made is my greatest wish in this life. F*K off. No matter how Fatty Liao rolled around, Kraft did not agree to his request. If it was the time when Alice was just made, Kraft was impatient and might have agreed. However, after getting along with Alice during this time, he could no longer simply treat Alice as a robot, so Kraft couldn't agree to Fatty Lau's request. However, in order to appease his friends, Kraft still agreed to make him a simple version of Harrow. In addition to the most basic artificial intelligence, Kraft does not intend to add too many functions to Fat Lau's Harrow, mainly using Come to help him play games and cheat. Under the temptation of the game-type Harrow, Fatty Liao decisively forgot his biggest wish in his life and flattered Kraft's flattery. He is proficient in this business. After sending away Fatty Liao, Kraft and Alice continued to nest in the studio, and then a few hours later, the dusty Martin Lee appeared here. Martin looked at his adopted son with a complicated expression. According to the news from the manpower he had arranged before, after Kraft was surrounded by Black Hands, they planned to find a chance to raid and rescue, but they were suddenly razed. The copper wall and iron wall were kept out, and when Kraft took back the copper wall and iron wall, the group of attackers had already lay on the ground. Originally, the appearance of Alice had already surprised Martin Lee, but after he was surprised, he did not take it too seriously, because no matter how much Alice looks like a person, it doesn't make much sense to him. In his opinion, Clough's special talents should not be used for these weird inventions, but to create more practical props similar to arm strength bracers. That's why Martin wanted to put some enemies to attack Kraft, and let him shift his mind to his personal armament. The first batch of gangsters only made Kraft more vigilant, and the second batch of mafia was the trial that Martin wanted to teach Kraft to learn. Unexpectedly, his carefully selected testers were actually solved by Kraft lightly. This is very embarrassing. Can you tell me how you managed the group of Italians? The father and the son stared at each other for a long time. Martin Lee, who was still guilty, turned his eyes away, cleared his throat and asked curiously. Martin Lee hurried over after receiving the news, without time to interrogate the mafia. Hello, start combat mode. Kraft clapped his palms and ordered. The combat mode is on, and the combat mode is on. Harrow on the table flapped his wings, and the studio instantly entered the copper wall and iron wall mode. Looking at the rows of machine guns protruding from the wall, Martin Lee's mouth twitched constantly. Although he wanted Kraft to equip himself with some self-defense equipment, it was too exaggerated. Don't worry, Martin, these guns use rubber bullets, electric shock bullets, and anesthesia bullets. They won't kill anyone. Seeing that Martin's face was not right, Kraft patted his arm comfortingly. Am I worried about this problem? Glancing silently at Kraft, who hadn't grasped the point, Martin squeezed his eyebrows and explained. No matter what bullet you use, if such a large-scale armament is known by an official organization such as the FBI, there is no good fruit to eat. Kraft curled his lips and retorted. You ran to provoke the gangsters in Hell's Kitchen. Are you afraid of being targeted by the official organization? Hearing Kraft's grievances, Martin rubbed his head with a wry smile. Isn't your wish to go back? If you have a case here, it won't be easy to go back, so Margia, just leave it to me to help. Kraft pursed his lips and said categorically, my wish is, we will go back together. If you can't go back, then I won't go either. Don't you want to leave me? Martin Lee, who was moved, gave Kraft a hug, then smiled and said, even so, don't even think that I agree with you to trouble Magia. Why? Kraft was 10,000 unconvinced. Because the Magia gang is not that simple. Martin Lee's expression was solemn, and he tapped his temple with his index finger. The equipment is much higher than your small workshop, and the scale is much larger. What do you think does this mean? Although Kraft's studio is only a private workshop, with his current capital and technology, the equipment in it is not the most cutting edge at present. It is at least above the average level, and the technology has advanced in recent decades. The speed is changing with each passing day. It is obviously abnormal that the equipment used by Magia Gang, an ordinary criminal organization, was even more advanced than its own studio 7 years ago, and the scale is huge. There are others behind them. Kraft's face also became ugly. Compared with Martin Lee, he knew more about the technical content of the equipment in his studio. Even if the Magia Gang is the largest gang in New York, it is not so easy to have a large-scale test base, let alone there are several more powerful gangs on top of the Magia Gang. The intervention of a large consortium or an official organization of America, Kraft does not believe it. Have you found out who it is? It's been too long, and there are people from the Magia Gang. I can't find clues at all. Martin Lee shook his head and replied, so I have begun to slowly withdraw my hands, and wait for the hammer to relax my vigilance. I'll check it out secretly. Hammer? The leader of the Magia Gang, Joseph Harrow, is nicknamed Hammerhead. Are you calling me? Are you calling me? The little green ball stretched out his hands and feet, hopped up to Martin and Kraft, waved and asked. Martin Lee Kraft Lee. The little guys you made, all have personality. Martin Lee twitched his mouth and gave Kraft a sideways look. Ha ha ha. Right? Kraft smiled and scratched his head, his expression very embarrassing. Because of Harrow's interruption, the conversation between the father and son couldn't go on. Martin patted Kraft on the shoulder and stood up. The matter about the Magia gang cannot be resolved in a short while, so let me give it to me for now. You are still young and not yet. When you bear these. Kraft nodded dejectedly. Even though he had full confidence in the inventions in his dreams, he still didn't feel that he could now go against America's consortium or even the government. But sooner or later, I will be able to create props that can push everything equally, and even if I don't directly conflict with the Magia gang, I can still use the technology in my dreams to investigate secretly. With his head down, Kraft Thief rolled his eyes. He was not an obedient baby. What Kraft Lee promised had something to do with his Dr. Handyman. If you want to inquire about the news, for Kraft, the optimal solution is naturally to use his own technology to collect information from the internet. I won't mention Alice, a robot that is more cute than practical. As an auxiliary artificial intelligence, hello, don't look at being silly when communicating with people, but on the internet, not just covering the sky with one hand. At least the ordinary level of security protection is basically nothing to it, even if it is. Harrow also comes and goes freely in the database of the New York Police Department. You have to ask how Kraft knows that he definitely let Harrow go for a stroll in it a long time ago. On the first day after the creation of Harrow, Kraft tested its ability on the internet. Firewalls in public institutions such as police stations, banks, etc. could not stop Harrow's invasion at all. It can't even be detected, and the more famous agencies such as FBI, CIA, IRS are not Harrow's opponents, but compared to other departments, they can detect Harrow's invasion. Although it was not impossible for Harrow to attack, it was not impossible to break through their defenses, but Kraft had no head iron. After knowing that Harrow was detected, he decisively let it give up the invasion and easily get rid of the tracking. In addition, there are a few more powerful databases for defending ability. Harrow failed to invade, and even Kraft was almost caught by one of them. Fortunately, Harrow's ability was reliable enough. In the end, it was successfully got rid of the tracking, but from Harrow's feedback, it seems that the other party is also an artificial intelligence. And the database with ability anti-tracking is the only thing Kraft can determine the right person. The location comes from Tony Stark's manor in New York. I have to say that although the Playboy is annoying, but the technology in his hands is really hard. After testing Harrow's ability, Kraft never let it invade other people's networks again. It was not that he was afraid of being caught by Stark's artificial intelligence, but that all the information he needed was in his dream. It is necessary to hack other people's databases. The previous test Kraft only asked Harrow to crack those firewalls, and he didn't move the information inside. But now it's different. In order to collect information from the Magian gang, Kraft had to ask Harrow to go online again. Definitely, Kraft doesn't plan to touch those dangerous places for the time being. First visit the police station in New York. The invasion begins. Harrow stayed in a dedicated concave link slot and quickly browsed the internal database of the New York Police Department. On the computer screen next to it, countless characters were walking fast. Keywords Magia Gang, search is complete. Soon, the information related to the Magia Gang was packaged by Harrow and downloaded to Kraft's computer. Hammerhead, Joseph Harrow, Hell's Kitchen Fire and Demon Gang. Mr. Negative. Kraft carefully checked the information downloaded by Harrow. There was no human experiment-related content in it, and it was obviously already covered up by that unknown force. But, Demon Gang? Mr. Negatives? Kraft scratched his head. Isn't this Martin? The name ability is really weak. It took 2 days to sweep all the databases where he had invaded by ability, but Kraft could not find any information related to the Magia Gang experiment. The only thing that matters is that in the intelligence of several official agencies such as the police station, there was a mention of an attack on the site of the Magian Gang 7 years ago. However, there is no information on who the attacker was. Kraft considered it for a long time, but still did not let Harrow attack the database of intelligence organizations such as the FBI. Although with Harrow's ability, even if the invasion was unsuccessful, he would not be caught by the tail, but with the exception of those intelligence organizations, in addition, Stark and the network power of several mysterious forces can make Kraft jealous. He is not sure if he will be copied by them when he invades. So after thinking about it again and again, Kraft gave up this idea. Anyway, his technique will constantly improve over time. There is no need to expose himself because of this little thing. After 7 years of waiting, it will not be bad. This time. Collecting information did not achieve any results. Kraft continued to focus on the invention in the dream. In the past, Kraft had been strengthening the defense of the studio because he wanted to guard against Martin's so-called commercial opponents. Now that he has free time, Kraft has begun to conduct a test that he has long wanted to understand. Can other people copy the unscientific equipment in my dream? Because of confidentiality, Kraft never found the opportunity to experiment. Now that Alice is an obedient little girl, she is definitely the most suitable candidate. The most suitable prop for testing is the onomatopoeia device of Dr. Ali. The technology is not high and the operation is not complicated. Even the cute and cute Alice can be copied like a cat. The results of the test were mixed for Kraft. The onomatopoeia made entirely by Alice shows the same effect as Kraft predicted. It is not as magical as the one made by Dr. Ali and himself, but as long as Kraft's participation is achieved, a certain degree of participation is achieved. The final finished product will have a qualitative leap, from ordinary scientific creations to some kind of magical props that are completely unscientific. Moreover, if the magic props made by Kraft are disassembled and assembled back in the original form, the magical effects will disappear. In such a situation, at least Kraft doesn't have to worry about technology leaks, but in contrast, Kraft wants to mass produce these magical props is also wishful thinking. But in general, Kraft is still quite satisfied with the results of the test. Technology is only valuable if it is monopolized, and it does not mean that Kraft cannot be mass-produced at all. Even if there are many props, it was originally a good product to get rid of those unscientific effects. For example, Kraft's new solar skateboard that Kraft learned from Dr. Ali removes the unscientific one that can chase the speed of the car. Among them, the efficient use of solar energy is originally a very powerful technology, which is better than those on the market. The conversion efficiency of the equipment is at least 2 or 3 levels higher. As for Da Vinci's solar flashlight, which also takes the solar route. I don't know how the funny guy did it. No matter how Kraft adjusts it, the energy converted from solar energy is only enough to light the bulb on the flashlight. There will be no more or no less. This is probably also in Dreamland technology. It's an unscientific phenomenon. As the members of the Demon Gang gradually withdrew from the Hell's Kitchen, Kraft did not have to stay in the studio every day. Under the urging of Martin Lee, he reluctantly returned to the school to attend classes. However, his research has not been put aside because of this. In addition to constantly absorbing the new dream knowledge, Kraft also took out the solar energy conversion technology mentioned before, and handed it over to Martin Lee to develop it. He guaranteed his own research funds and allowed Martin to quickly make up for the losses he had previously attacked the Magian Gang. It's a pity that I still can't replicate those inventions with special powers. Kraft glanced at the magic core that failed again on the table, and sighed helplessly. He hadn't had many dreams during this period, and they were all mysterious dreams, or they needed a lot of manpower and equipment. Of heavy industry products. For the time being, Kraft didn't want to be noticed by America's official organization. The heavy industry was naturally unplayable, so he could only continue to try some mysterious creations, but all failed. Recently, the only mechanical prosthetic technology he can master, the original technology content is not too high, that is, the core neural link technology is a bit interesting. In fact, Kraft was more interested in the technique called alchemy used by the freely movable armor. Unfortunately, the protagonist of the dream was a young lady who installed prosthetic legs for shoutouting. There was no alchemy in the room. In books related to art, Kraft tried to copy the alchemy circle drawn by the armor man, but there was no response. It should be that certain core technologies were not shown in the dream. It would be great if I could dream of the armored man or the little beanie. Or I could dream of an unscientific scientist like Dr. Ali. Kraft tidied up his workshop, pulled his hand on his messy head twice, and walked slowly to the house. I'm back. Kraft opened the door and saw Alice sitting on the sofa in the living room, eating snacks and laughing while watching the soap opera on TV. Yeah. Welcome back. Alice patted the scraps of snacks in her hands, smiled silly at Kraft, and then dashed to the kitchen with small steps. Supper is ready. I will bring it out. Kraft lifted his forehead and sighed. With this laid-back look of Alice, how can I tell that she is a robot? I will arrange her admission next semester. The thought that he would be forced to go to school at school, while Alice would stay at home and play happily, Kraft's heart was very unbalanced. Originally, he planned to let Alice start studying in high school. Now he decided let her start reading with herself from the 8th grade. Anyway, it was only a year away, no difference. As a result, when Kraft told Alice of the decision, she looked very happy. Kraft. There really is something wrong with this robot. I would actually like going to school. No matter how surprised Kraft is at Alice's weird hobby, she still has to eat. Although Alice is always stupid, her culinary ability is unexpectedly excellent. At first, he could only make ordinary level meals according to the recipes, but now he has evolved to the point where he can study the color of the dishes independently, and the taste is not inferior to that of Fatty Lau's cook. So I tossed for a long time, just made myself a cooking robot? After devouring the delicious dinner prepared by Alice, Kraft patted his belly contentedly. Okay. At least there is no need to urge Martin to find me a mother. After dinner, they washed the dishes with Alice, and the two of them sat in front of the TV and started playing games. America is so good that there are almost no homework. Although in Kraft's memory, he only went to America's school, but his subconscious mind told him that he had had a learning experience with heavy homework. This should be caused by the memory he once lost. A similar feeling as Kraft. Featuring didn't meet it once or twice, so he didn't care about it at all. The two of them played until the play that Alice chased was about to start. Kraft went back to his room to finish the meager homework, washed up and lay down on the bed. Although tomorrow is the weekend, Kraft still goes to bed very early, because in addition to research, games and food, his biggest hobby is sleeping. After all, there are everything in his dreams, which is much more interesting than those soap operas on TV. And the appearance of dreams is irregular, and there is a sense of anticipation of scratching the lottery ticket every time you fall asleep. There is an old saying that goes well, if you do not forget, there must be repercussions. Probably after being chanted by Kraft for a long time recently, Dr. Dongyun once again appeared in his dream. The unscientific degree of the invention in the dream this time is more so than the name of this robot. It was a simple, red, triangular scarf, and it took Dr. Dongyun a few hours to make it. And the effect of this scarf is to make animals talk. You are making trouble. No matter how you look at it, this scarf is just an ordinary cloth scarf. There is no chip in it, and there is no magic. What is the principle of letting animals talk like this, bastard? And from Kraft's observations, this scarf not only allows animals to speak as simple as possible, but also has a certain degree of intelligence enhancement. In other words, it not only gives animals the ability to speak human words, but also allows animals to have the ability to speak close to human thinking mode. This is simply unscientific. Although this invention is unscientific, and it does not seem to be practical for Kraft, when he woke up from a dream, he jumped off the bed for the first time and wanted to buy it at the pet store. A pet came back. Regardless of the principle of this thing, whether it is useful or not, Kraft has done it. Because it's so fun, isn't it? Huh. Brother, you got up really early today. Alice, who was preparing breakfast, heard the movement and poked her head out of the kitchen to greet Roar. Can I have wonton for breakfast? Either way, I'll go out first. Kraft hurriedly changed his shoes and was about to run out. Brother, where are you going? Isn't it the weekend today? Alice looked confused. I'll buy a pet back. Alice, what animal do you like? Thinking that it's impossible to take care of pets in normal times, this matter will eventually fall on Alice. Kraft thinks it's better to ask in advance, although Nanano, who came from the same source as her in the dream, seems to like cats very much. But who knows whether there will be any changes after the change of origin. Huh? Pets? Alice looked very happy, she tapped her lips with her finger for a moment. Cats and dogs are fine, I like them as long as they are furry, but... Alice stretched out her right hand, revealing the electronic watch hidden on her wrist, and then tilted her head to remind Kraft. At this time, the pet shop shouldn't be open yet, right? Kraft. Because he was eager to try the invention in his dream, Kraft accidentally ignored the question of time. Under Alice's reminder, he calmed down again when he was excited, and then yawned greatly. Then I will go back to sleep first. Kraft, whose excitement disappeared, dropped his eyelids all at once, dragging his steps weakly to his room. You're half past. No, come and wake me up in an hour. Since having Alice, Kraft has abandoned the screaming chicken wake-up device, and the cute robot girl wakes you up, isn't she fragrant? What more screaming chicken? Got it. Alice agreed, and went back to the kitchen to continue preparing breakfast. This retreat sleep was calm, and Kraft was awakened by Alice before he could dream of those special dreams. After waking up again, Kraft finished his breakfast and took Alice out to buy a pet. There are still many pet shops in Chinatown. In addition to popular pet shops that sell cats and dogs, there is also a very traditional flower and bird market. Not only are there a variety of birds for sale, there are also insect pets such as grasshoppers and crickets. But Alice is not interested in those bugs, and they can't wear a scarf, so Kraft chose to go to the most common pet shop. According to Kraft's habit, the first test will try to restore everything in the dream, so his first choice is naturally to buy a small black cat. He even thought of the name, so he followed the name of Mr. Sakamoto in the dream. Transliterated here, it's called Sakamoto. However, when he entered the pet shop, Kraft's gaze was attracted by another creature, and his brain filled the shape of the face with a red scarf, always feeling extremely familiar. Did I have a dog of this breed before? Kraft habitually scratched his hair, and then asked the clerk at the pet shop. Hello, is there a gray-colored breed of this dog? Sorry kid, the Shiba Inu has only 4 coat colors, namely red, black, flax and white. There is no gray breed. The clerk shook her head and introduced Kraft kindly. Moreover, the quantity of white firewood is relatively small, and we don't have it now. The little guy in the cage belongs to Chichai, and we also have black firewood and sesame firewood here, but they are not placed outside. Do you need to take you to see it? There is no ash. Kraft raised his eyebrows. He had seen Shiba Inu before. It was indeed red or yellow. He hadn't paid special attention to it before. It was just that this time when it was linked to the red scarf, he always felt that it should be the gray Shiba Inu. Never mind. Kraft shook his head. It doesn't make sense to continue to entangle this kind of unthinkable things. If there is no gray, then find a similar color. Take me to see Black Chai, please, Kraft said to the clerk. Please follow me. The young lady clerk took Kraft into the back room. Inside, there were neatly stacked cages with pets. As the two entered, they alarmed the cats and dogs inside. All of a sudden, the cat howling and the dog barking, one after another. Shish, be quiet, and be cautious again. Be careful that I deduct your rations. The young lady clerk skillfully calmed the noisy pets and brought Kraft to a cage. This is Black Chai, and the messy coat next to it is Sesame Chai. It's a bit different from what I imagined. The hair color distribution of Hei Chai is very different from Kai Chai, and it is also far from the gray Chai in Kraft's impression. Then choose the Chichai outside. Kraft was not a mother-in-law. Compared with that, Chichai outside felt closer to the dog in Kraft's memory. Okay. The clerk who made a business was very happy. She led Kraft out again, put the red firewood outside in a convenient cage, and gave Kraft its pedigree certificate. There is a small bag of dog food and a toothstick that the dog likes very much. Alice, have you chosen? Kraft took the dog cage and found Alice, who was squatting in the corner to suck the cat, knocked her head and asked. Ah. These kids are so cute, I forgot. Alice squatted on the ground with 3 kittens of different colors in her arms, with a happy expression on her face. Sure enough, this guy is unreliable. Kraft sighed helplessly, scanned the nearby cats, and picked a Bombay cat that was 7 or 8 similar to Mr. Sakamoto in the dream. Go to the front desk to pay the bill with pet supplies. Go. Kraft knocked Alice on the head again, and then handed over the cage with the little black cat and a big bag of pet supplies to her. He picked up the cage with the dog in one hand, and pulled Alice in the other and walked out. Let me breathe for another 5 minutes. Alice was dragged out of the pet shop by Kraft with a look of dismay. Don't you have a cat in your hand? Go back and hold it and suck it enough. Oh. That's right. Alice suddenly realized, then she held the cage in front of her, rubbed the cage lightly with her cheek, and apologized to the little black cat with a petting look. I'm sorry, I actually left you in the cold. By the way, brother, we have to give them a name first. After apologizing to the little black cat, Alice walked 2 steps quickly and came to Kraft to remind her. Well, just call it Mr. Quinn. Kraft lifted the cage in his hands and spoke the name that suddenly appeared in his mind without hesitation. What about this kid? Alice raised the cat cage and motioned. Because of the name of Mr. Quinn in front, the Sacramento that Kraft thought before seemed not so appropriate. How about calling it Mr. Bain? But this kid is a girl. Then call her Beja. Kraft hurriedly took out Quinn's pedigree certificate, and after looking at the gender marked on it, he was relieved. It's a male dog. Then there is no need to change his name, it can be regarded as saving Kraft's obsessive-compulsive disorder. The two brought Mr. Quinn and Miss Beja to Kraft's private workshop, threw the 2 pets to Alice's care, and Kraft plunged into the studio. Unlike when making Alice, Kraft couldn't understand the technology used to make talking scarf. So he didn't have any moths, and honestly followed the dream of Dr. Dongyun. Steps to copy it mechanically. Because the difficulty of making is not high, and Kraft does not need to think about it, so the speed of making the scarf is very fast. When Alice is ready for lunch, Kraft also made 2 scarves. Can you really make them speak? Alice stared expectantly at Quinn and Beja, who at the moment knew nothing about. It might work. Kraft is actually not very confident, because compared to Alice, the robot, the scarf that allows animals to talk is more like a mysterious side object than a scientific product. So far, the mysterious side creation that Kraft copied has not won as successful. Anyway, try it first. Anyway, it's just a scarf, and it won't cause any harm to them. As Kraft spoke, he passed a scarf to Alice, and then tied it up with her 2 pets. Yes, can you speak? Beja sauce. After tying the scarf for the little black cat, Alice couldn't wait to ask. The little black cat Beja first scratched the scarf around her neck with her paw, then shook her head twice. You are too tight, meow, idiot. A slightly sharp female voice came from Beja's mouth. Aw, hug, sorry. I'm here to relax you a little bit. Alice hurriedly adjusted Beja's scarf. Is this all right? Well, it's much more comfortable. Bee stretched her waist, dangling her tail and said. Her original sharp voice became lazy. Surprised. Quinn, who had been sluggishly watching Alice and Beja communicate, suddenly jumped up. You can speak. Then he jumped again in hindsight. Surprised. I can actually speak too. How do you feel that the dog's IQ is not so high? Kraft touched his nose, quickly took out his phone, and began to inquire. The ranking of canine intelligence. Shiba Inu. 79 out of the list. Actually lower than the 3 sledge fools. Slander. This is naked slander. Quinn stuck his nose on the screen of Kraft's phone, wrinkled his nose, exposing Bisenson's fangs. Ha ha ha, silly dog. Beja couldn't help laughing after hearing Kraft's announcement. Do you want to fight? Quinn quickly turned his angry gaze to Beja's body. Don't bully Beja. She is a girl. Alice came to support Beja for the first time. Big brother. They bullied me. Quinn's speed at finding backers is really unlike the dog breed ranked 79 in intelligence. Seeing the dog wagging his tail violently at him, Kraft twitched his mouth, but at any rate the dog he had chosen had all begged him, so he still had to help. Kraft clicked on the phone a few more times. The intelligence of the Bombay cat. One of the 3 dumbest cats. The corners of Kraft's mouth twitched again, and the level of his pet selection was no 1, so he chose 2 items with worrisome intelligence. What? This is impossible. This lady is smart. Now Beja stopped doing it, screaming and rushed towards the phone in Kraft's hand. Don't make trouble. Kraft raised his hand quickly, avoiding Beja's pounce. Ha 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 ha. Didn't expect it. You were stupid than me. Quinn slapped his tongue out and laughed happily before being slapped on the nose by Beja, who turned his head. You actually dare to sneak attack. A beast. Quinn, who was attacked, naturally refused to give up, turning his head and biting towards Beja. Eat my trick. Rua. Ah. Can't fight. You guys don't fight anymore. Alice hurriedly tried to persuade her to fight. I always feel. The home will be very lively in the future. Seeing the scene of cats and dogs jumping in front of him, the corners of Kraft's mouth twitched frantically. After giving the last command to the men of the demon gang, Mr. Negatives twisted his neck, took off the demon mask from his face, and let out a long suffocating breath. With his exhalation, Mr. Film's dark skin gradually returned to its original skin color, and his white suit turned back to black. Martin Lee walked out of the headquarters of the demon gang, bypassed 2 streets, got in the Ford car he usually drove, and drove home. Previously, he fought with the Magia gang and suffered both losses. Although his demon gang did not lose a lot of business channels and territory like the Magia gang, it also cost a lot of US dollars and a large amount of ammunition reserves. It would have taken a lot of time to recover the blood slowly. Fortunately, Kraft came up with a new type of solar technology, which made the demon gang's recovery speed much faster. But even so, the demon gang has recently been able to recover. There can be no more big moves. Martin Lee has basically stayed with the devil's side to do the final finishing work until just now. He failed to take revenge this time, but Martin Lee is not in a hurry. Although it seems that they have suffered both losses and losses, there are still differences. For example, the demon gang is like losing too much blood. As long as a blood transfusion, they can quickly recover, while the Magia gang it was interrupted, and even if it was reconnected, it was not as flexible as before. Therefore, as long as the demon gang recovers, the next time you attack the Magia gang, you will be sure of it. It's just that Martin Lee didn't want to get rid of the Magia gang so quickly, but wanted to stun the snake and see if he could draw out the mysterious force behind them. These are definitely things that need to be considered in the future. Martin Lee, who has been busy for more than half a month, just wants to go home quickly and take a good rest. When he parked the car in the garage, Martin pushed open the door of his house. "Put the dried fish down for me, you stupid dog. Do you still want to take back the food in my hands? I'm afraid it's not living in a dream. Give me death. Kill the dog. Who will fight the dog for me?" As soon as Martin Lee pushed open the door, he heard a noisy clamor inside, and the two noisy sounds looked very strange. Just when he was wondering if Kraft brought his classmates back to play, he saw a black cat chasing a yellow dog rushing down the stairs, all with a bright red scarf around their necks. Have a pet? Martin Lee was stunned. With his knowledge of Kraft, the kid had absolutely no spare time to take care of pets. So Alice raised it. Martin frowned. He had stayed in the demon gang for this period of time, and he didn't feel close to Alice, the robot. At this moment, the little robot girl he was talking about chased down from upstairs on a panic step. "You two, stop me. If this happens, no one will ever want to eat snacks." Scared. This stupid dog is clearly making trouble. The cat and the dog who were chasing stopped at the same time, and then quarreled with Alice. "I am so much bigger than Beja, but the amount of snacks is the same. Is this reasonable?" "Shut up. You stupid dog. No noise. Ah, Uncle Martin, you are back." Only then did Alice discover Martin Lee, who was messy in the wind, and quickly dropped the two pets that were pulling each other and greeted him. "How is this going?" Martin pointed to the cat and dog who were arguing in English and asked stiffly. "Ah, these are Mr. Quinn and Miss Beja. My brother and I bought the pets from the pet store the other day." "That's not what I'm asking. They. Yes. How can they speak?" Martin frantically pointed to the cat and dog who were watching to calm down again, and emphasized every word. "Oh, this is my brother's invention," Alice explained in hindsight. "It's the red scarf. After putting it on, you can let the animal talk." Alice folded her hands beside her cheeks, her voice full of admiration. "Brother's invention is really amazing." "Is this a serious question?" Martin Lee's heart is like a violent wind passing through the country, a galloping horse. "How did the Kraft kid do it? Where is the Kraft?" Martin couldn't wait to find his adopted son to ask for more details. "Brother, he hasn't finished school yet." Alice looked at the digital watch on her wrist, and then surprised roar a little. "Ah, it's all this time. I'm about to start preparing dinner." "Uncle Martin, watch TV here for a while. Beja, Quinn, you two must not quarrel anymore." Alice confessed a few words hastily and trot into the kitchen. Martin Lee, Quinn, Beja. One person, one cat and one dog looked at each other for a while, or the dog was the first to say, "Are you the eldest brother's father? How should I call you?" Roar. Quinn tilted his head and stuck out his tongue with a silly expression on his face. "Stupid dog. Didn't you hear Alice calling him Uncle Martin just now? Let's just yell it." The little black cat Beja lightly jumped on Quinn's back and slapped his skull. "That's not good." Quinn hesitated for a moment, and decided not to turn his face with B. Since he is the father of the eldest brother, he is the owner of this family. It should be given a special title, such as Dad. Category? No, just call me Martin. Martin Lee rejected the remnant name Roar with a black thread, then he squatted down and asked the two pets with interest. "Do you understand our human language before you put on this scarf?" Surprised. As expected of Big Brother's father, Quinn's eyes widened. Big Brother asked the same after putting on a scarf. After a short pause, Quinn continued to answer. "I didn't understand it before. I can only understand a little bit of what you humans mean, but now even if you take off the scarf, you can understand what you are saying." So, Martin reached out and rubbed Quinn's head. "That's really amazing." In addition to this situation, Martin could not find other words to describe Kraft's invention. Even Mr. Film, he couldn't restrain his curiosity when encountering such a miraculous thing. He turned on the TV, but did not put his mind on it. Instead, he chatted with Quinn one after another. Ya kept the cat's cold personality and started licking fur on her own on the sofa. "Huh. Brother is back." Quinn, who was chatting with Martin, suddenly straightened up, turned his head towards the door of the house, and then quickly ran to the entrance and squatted down. "Big Brother." As soon as Kraft entered the door, Quinn greeted him with his tongue out as usual, and walked around his feet excitedly. "Big Brother, your father Martin is back." Quinn circled Kraft while reporting to him, and obviously, he didn't listen to Martin's refusal. "Okay. I get it now." Hearing the old man's name Roar, Kraft twitched his mouth, then reached out and rubbed Quinn's dog's head and walked into the room. As soon as he entered the living room, he saw Martin looking at himself with complicated expression. What's wrong? How did you do it? If you talk about the previous arm-strength wristbands, the defensive devices in the workshop, and even the bionic robot Alice, although Martin is surprised, he can barely understand it, but this scarf that allows animals to speak is really beyond his range of understanding. I actually want to know how this is done. Kraft touched his nose and said helplessly, I can't say that, it just feels like this allows animals to talk, and then it's done. So is it inspiration from a dream again? Martin rolled his eyes and asked. Almost. Kraft sat next to Martin. I don't know the specifics. Anyway, it's an awakening, and suddenly I have the urge to make this kind of scarf, and then I did it. In fact, Kraft tried to tell Martin Lee about his dreams a long time ago, but he didn't know why. Whenever he wanted to say it, his heart would rise. This kind of strong resistance, to the greatest extent, as only telling Martin that he got inspiration from his dream, so Kraft didn't bother to explain it over time. Alright. Martin Lee rubbed his eyebrows. Although it is a magical thing for animals to speak, it is not a big deal, but try to keep it secret as much as possible. Don't let others know. America's agent organization is not. Less, it will be troublesome to be watched by them. Don't worry, when I take them out, I take off their scarves. Clough nodded his head. He didn't think so much. He just felt that after being known, he would be seen as a monkey by a group of people like the previous Stark incident. He did it because it was troublesome. Urgent notice. Urgent notice. Green monsters appear near the coast of Brooklyn. New Yorkers, please avoid them in time. Below is a picture taken by a reporter ahead. While Kraft was chatting with Martin Lee while leaning the dog, the host's eager roar sounded suddenly on the TV, and immediately after the TV screen was turned, it switched to a sharply shaking scene. The next one was the next one. Huge amounts of the green figure was rampaging in the city, and military planes and tanks were constantly firing at him. The chaotic scene lasted only more than 10 seconds, and it soon went dark. The final picture was that the green monster was escaping towards the beach. Meow. Surprised. What is this thing? The dog in Kraft's arms bounced violently, and the little black cat on the side also arched, his hair exploded, and he was obviously shocked by the green monster on the TV. Hello. Search me for relevant information. Following Kraft's order, the red haro, who had been pretending to be ornaments on the top of the TV, spread its wings and used its mung bean file-size eyes to project a virtual screen on the wall, and at the same time the ceiling of the living room opened, hanging down. There were several screens down, and the images on these screens switched rapidly, making people dazzling and unable to come across. The search begins. The search begins. Kraft. Martin Lee on the side jumped up. What have you done to our house?